Chapter 77. No, I won't do it. Pride looked like he would never do it even if he was beaten to death. He would rather not pilot the plane and just pick on the people from the other military academies, but he would never do that. He was a pilot of a fighter jet, not a pesticide sprayer. Knight told Pride about the plan when he asked him to come over, and after pondering over Silen's suggestion, Knight reformulated the operation plan. They would spray the pesticide directly from the plane. Not only would it be more efficient that way, the success rate would also be a little higher as well. Since Surd had been marked red, there were only 6 of them left for the operation now. The best combination would be one pilot the plane while the other 5 move. If they used 2 people to pilot the plane, then 4 people moving would be too much of a stretch. But Pride rejected him directly before he even finished listening. As if he had expected this, Knight did not have much of a reaction and said indifferently, "Then you go mark red, I'll fly the plane. It's the same with or without you anyway." Knight was still muttering as he turned around and left. "Tch, you don't even know how to spray the pesticide, no wonder you lost the plane battle. You. Let me tell you, goading is useless." Although he said that, Pride's expression clearly showed that he was ready to listen to the plan. Knight curled his lips. He really did not know how the G family had raised such a freak. After ignoring Pride's earlier words and explaining the plan to Pride, Knight sent encrypted messages to both Ci Jincheng and Silen. Hard was currently on his way to meet up with Silen Helong, and Silen would tell him how to act when the time came. If a game always followed a set pattern, then it would be meaningless. So when Knight heard Silen's suggestion, he was very much in agreement. Perhaps this operation would be an epoch-making event in the history of the Sector Championships integrated warfare. After all, no one had thought of using such a despicable method in the past, right? After the first few days of peace and quiet, the atmosphere between the 4 academies began to grow tense. Usually, at this time, they would start attacking each other. Prometheus High School, which was marked red by the 1st Military Academy, Billy Academy, which was marked red by the 2nd Military Academy, Wagner High School, which was marked red by the 3rd Military Academy, Kiralag High School, which was marked red by the 4th Military Academy, and San Border Academy, which was marked red by 7 lights, were all there. There were also military academies, which were marked red by the 1st Military Academy, such as Ryan and Bon. When Surd was first brought there, he was filled with emotions, and the people from the other universities looked at him strangely. It was not the gaze of a loser, but one of curiosity and fear of the unknown. Of course, the people from San Border were definitely not friendly. 7 Lights was truly unusual this year. No one had expected that 7 Lights would adopt the same offensive strategy as the military academies, and the time they took to eliminate San Border was not any longer than the other 4 military academies. There were many people who hoped that 7 Lights could be the dark horse this time and step on one or more of the 4 military academies. If that happened, then the legend of the military academies would be broken. When Ryan and Bon were brought to the surveillance station, many people looked as if they had seen a ghost. Bon especially, he was a special class student. Although they had never seen him participate in the Sector Championships arena before, it was publicly acknowledged that Bon was stronger than Ryan. There were a lot of screens in the surveillance station, and through the multi-angle view of the satellite array, it was possible to watch the actions of the people who were not marked red. Every academy and every student's focus was different. Many of them were paying close attention to Shadow X and Lung, because the instructors had declared that they would pay close attention to them. But now they no longer had that chance, so they could only wait and see who could mark these 2 people red. It was because of this that some people were able to see Bon and Lung's scene. No one saw what happened under the surface of the lake. The only thing they knew was that when Lung surfaced to the shore, he was carrying an unconscious Bon. Then, he threw Bon on the shore and marked him red. At that moment, many people could not help but shudder, including a couple of military officers. In truth, Bon himself did not know what happened at the time. After he dove into the lake and swam downstream, he could clearly sense Lung's position. But just as he was about to act, Lung suddenly changed direction and swam straight towards him. That kind of speed, Bon felt that it was not something a human could possess. At the time, Bon felt more like he was facing a certain sea monster in the deep sea. But before Bon could react, his vision turned black and he fainted. When he woke up, he was already at the surveillance station. It was exactly because Seven Lights was the center of attention that when Surd was brought here, many people tried to strike up a conversation and fish for information. However, Surd was not in the mood to deal with other people right now. Since he was marked red, Seven Lights' operation team would probably make some changes. Surd switched his observation point and observed the actions of every person in Seven Lights. After cooperating with them for so many days, Surd had some understanding of their operation method. Suddenly, Surd's hand paused as he pressed the switch button. He zoomed in on the image, and when he saw clearly, he immediately narrowed his eyes. This was because when he switched to Pride's observation point, he discovered that there was a device on Pride's plane, and Surd was absolutely certain that it was Scyllin's handiwork. What kind of dirty trick did Scyllin come up with this time? Surd prepared to lock his observation point onto Pride. He knew that this thing Scyllin had installed on the plane would definitely be the fuse if there was an operation. Moreover, it was definitely the highlight of this operation. When someone saw that Surd had locked his observation point onto Pride, they also adjusted their observation point and stared at Pride. Although they did not know what was going to happen on Pride's side, since Surd had chosen to lock onto Pride's point, they would do the same. Surd was a Seven Lights member after all, and they should have some sort of tacit understanding with each other. Yes, something was definitely going to happen. At the same time, there were also some students who did not notice Surd's actions and were observing the other people in Seven Lights who began to shout, "Seven Lights is playing with fire this time. It looks like they're taking action, and it's against the 4th Military Academy." Seven Lights group was heading towards the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. They're actually targeting the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. Isn't that a little too bold? Some students began to pay serious attention when they heard these words, but even more people chose to pay attention to the 1st Military Academy right now. This was because the 1st Military Academy and the 2nd Military Academy were in a heated battle right now, and the battle between the military academies was very entertaining, intense, and enjoyable to watch. That was why they chose the 1st Military Academy between Seven Lights and the 1st Military Academy, and that was why they would regret it later on. Half a day ago, the 3rd Military Academy had attacked the 4th Military Academy's stronghold, but the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned quickly, and their defense was excellent. After both sides had one person marked red, the 3rd Military Academy's personnel saw that their attack was futile, and logically speaking, it was unwise to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold at this time because almost all of the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned to the stronghold, and the person who marked Surd red had also returned to the stronghold. An hour later. Holy shit, what the hell is this? The people who had pointed their observation point at Pride roared. Chapter 78. The cry attracted a lot of people, and those who saw the scene could not help but sigh. Seven Lights sure was a troublemaker. Pride's piloting skills were indeed pretty good. Although he'd lost 2 out of 3 mech battles against Knight, and perhaps in terms of attack power, Pride was still slightly weaker than Knight. If he didn't attack and only dodged, even Knight would have a hard time finding gaps in Pride's flight. The 4th Military Academy was very surprised by Seven Lights' attack. They actually chose this time to attack their base when all their members were present. Had Seven Lights gone mad this time? But in the Sentinel alarm, only Pride who was piloting the plane appeared. No one else from Seven Lights could be seen. However, since Pride was here, the others could not be far away either. The 4th Military Academy began to enter a state of alert. Although Seven Lights was not from Sector C, there were a few very troublesome people in Seven Lights. Therefore, the 4th Military Academy decided to be careful to avoid unexpected failure. The strange thing was that Pride was only flying the plane around the perimeter. The sentinels outside the 4th Military Academy's base did not have much firepower, and their ground-to-air firepower was lacking. This was why Pride could leisurely circle around the perimeter. Ignore him. Let him do as he pleases, the 4th Military Academy's captain said. He felt that Pride would not do something like this because he was bored to death. There must be someone behind this, and Seven Lights was definitely plotting something. Therefore, he chose to deal with the situation with inaction. After all, the other party was only hanging around the perimeter. However, Pride's hanging around did not last long before it started to deteriorate. The thick brown-yellow smoke sprayed out of the plane gradually moved towards the 4th Military Academy's base along with the breeze. Pride flew the plane back and forth with the wind, and the brown-yellow smoke grew thicker and thicker. The optical equipment could not see the scene inside the smoke at all. At the surveillance station, the students saw this scene of brown-yellow smoke. They're actually using smoke? That's not the point. How did they get this smoke? The camp did not distribute anything related to smoke grenades at all. Inside the 4th Military Academy's spaceplane, the technical student did not grow nervous because of the brown-yellow smoke. Just because the optical equipment was not good didn't mean there was no other way. Smoke is already outdated. Before he could finish, he noticed a missile warning. It was the same missile that Seven Lights had used to slaughter Sand Border. However, the 4th Military Academy was also capable of intercepting 2 of the 3 missiles, and only one managed to burrow into the ground. When they learned of Seven Lights' method of dealing with Sand Border, the people of the 4th Military Academy had already made relevant preparations. That was why they were able to adjust their interceptions in time when the missiles appeared. Even if they missed one, they could immediately start the anti-invasion program. But a sentinel in the outer perimeter has been destroyed. Destroy it with manpower. Someone has infiltrated the smoky area. Although the invasion on Seven Lights' side had yet to succeed, it did cause some trouble for the sentinel system and made it less responsive. This gave the infiltrator an opportunity to take advantage of, and once they had infiltrated, destroying the sentinel that had been disturbed by the invasion would be a walk in the park. Seven Lights' main breakthrough point was the missile that had successfully burrowed into the ground, because radar detection was useless in that area. Moreover, that area was also shrouded in brownish-yellow smoke. Seven Lights must have made preparations beforehand, and the 4th Military Academy would not be able to gain the upper hand if they sent their men over. At the same time, the smoke was spreading towards them, and Seven Lights could also follow the smoke and break in. If they did not take measures in time, it would be troublesome if they were to break in. Captain, I'm going to red them. I'm going to. Me too, wait. The 4th Military Academy's medical student frowned and said, I've analyzed the smoke's composition, but because the equipment we're equipped with isn't fully functional, we don't know if they're harmful to the human body even if we've analyzed their composition. From the analysis of the smoke's composition, it could be concluded that most of the smoke came from the plants on this planet. Everyone had come into contact with these plants in the forest, and there were introductions about the plants and animals on this planet since a long time ago. There was no mention of any of them being highly toxic, and even if they were only slightly toxic and would not cause much damage. However, the medical student couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Although every one of them looked harmless, there was no guarantee that they would be lethal if they were mixed together. Because of the smoke, there was no telling if the Seven Lights people were wearing protective gear, and they did not have equipment with more complete functions to conduct an in-depth analysis. There was no way to determine the harmfulness of the smoke. Back at the camp, they were routinely issued a head-to-toe protective suit, but for the longest time, Very few people participating in the integrated warfare contest would wear it. It was because it would slightly affect their movements after wearing it, and in a battle between experts, the slightest bit of shadow was fatal. Therefore, more people would not wear protective suit. For safety's sake, 2 of the 4 people who went out wore protective suits, and the other 2 did not, but they did wear gas masks. It did not take long after the quartet entered the smoke zone to discover an anomaly. First, the 7 Lights people were not wearing protective suits, so the 2 4th Military Academy people who were wearing protective suits were taken out by Knight and Sillin each. Second, the 2 4th Military Academy people who were not wearing protective suits discovered that a lot of red rashes had appeared on the surface of their bodies where they came into contact with the smoke. They were itchy and numb, and they were showing signs of spreading to their surroundings. Even though they were trained, it was very difficult for them to endure this forever. At the same time, they had to stay alert for any attacks around them. However, the duo did not last long before they were marked red as well. The 2 people who were marked red because they were not wearing protective suits wanted to cry but had no tears as they stared at the red rashes on their bodies and lay on the ground like corpses. "Yo, you 2 look pretty comfortable." Lung walked over with an infuriating smile on his face. "You guys are so fucking despicable. To think that you would use such a thing." One of the people lying on the ground said, "All's fair in war. This is called skill, understand?" It was obvious that the duo understood it as well. It was just that they felt uncomfortable on the inside, and that was all they said. Lung looked at them with a pitiful expression on his face. He took out a bottle and poured the liquid inside on the 2 men's rashes. When he saw that the red rashes were gradually receding, Lung turned around with a smug look on his face. As expected, this young master has the potential to be the savior of the world. The 2 people lying on the ground really wanted to violate the rules and shoot this bastard red. It's obvious that this thing isn't something you, young Master Lung, can make. What the hell are you showing off for? At the surveillance station, the students could not see the situation inside the smoke. They only knew that the 4 people who went in were marked red. What the hell is going on? The 4th Military Academy is screwed this time. 7 Lights is truly amazing. I didn't think that they would actually be able to hack a military academy team. Surd was very happy right now. He was the one who was marked red by the 4th Military Academy, and now that the 4th Military Academy had been forced into such a state, it was obvious that they would not be able to hold on much longer if this continued. Surd felt a wave of satisfaction when he got his revenge for being marked red, but he regretted that he was not able to participate in this significant red mark battle. At first, the 2nd Military Academy thought that they would definitely be at the bottom this time. Due to Ryan and Bond's accident being marked red, the 2nd Military Academy's strength had greatly decreased. This was also the reason why the 1st Military Academy had set their eyes on them. However, they did not expect to receive another piece of news at this time. The 4th Military Academy had been completely wiped out, and they had been wiped out even earlier than they were. The 2nd Military Academy's originally heavy hearts immediately lightened up. Chapter 79. After the 2nd and 4th Military Academies had been eliminated, the game was almost over. 1st Military Academy was the first to collect all 10 energy blocks, and to everyone's surprise, 7 Lights had collected the energy blocks 2 hours earlier than 3rd Military Academy, obtaining 2nd place for the first time in history. The higher-ups of 7 Lights were probably so happy that their mouths were crooked. God knows how many people would rack their brains to squeeze into 7 Lights next year. In the space station, the officers were sitting inside the observation room. Unlike when they were at the camp, the observation room was quieter right now. The officers were all silent, and everyone except Gerard looked like they were deep in thought. Gerard was very happy. These kids sure lived up to expectations. He had to thank Juanil for not having the time this time, or this cushy job would never have fallen into his hands. Although he was a little reluctant when he took over, now it looked like it was a cushy job indeed. Gerard, just what is that kid's background? The leading officer of 1st Military Academy pointed at Sillin on the screen with his chin and asked. He's from the Duance family. I don't know how he grew up to be like this. Gerard expressed that he did not know either. About that modified missile, it's not something an ordinary engineer can do. Also, Sir Mo probably didn't teach him to make that thing, did he? Although it was theoretically possible to make something out of those materials, in reality, the officers had yet to see any of their integrated warfare students able to do so. The first time Seven Lights used that modified missile, there were 5 of them, and they had all been used to slaughter Sandborder. The materials inside the spaceplane were only enough to modify 5 missiles, and after the slaughter of Sandborder, Sillin had dismantled some usable materials from Sandborder's spaceplane and made the 3 missiles used to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold later on. I don't know about that. Why don't you ask Sir Mo? Gerard said helplessly. The leading officer of 1st Military Academy shook his head like he was having a cramp. I'm not going. Actually, this kind of talent can totally be absorbed into the army as soon as possible. It's too wasteful to let him develop outside. Another officer lamented. Gerard squinted at him disdainfully. You think we haven't tried? During the last Seven Lights mission, that kid performed very well, and he was even chosen by a lieutenant general sent down from above. Later on, that lieutenant general went to Sir Mo to ask for him, but Sir Mo scolded him so hard that he didn't even dare to make a sound on the spot. Even Juanil and I were scolded so badly that we couldn't even lift our heads for a few days. The moment we saw Sir Mo's car, we ran away as fast as we could. The others fell silent. They had some understanding of Mohing, so they could imagine what had happened. Even a lieutenant general was scolded to such an extent, so they, the field officers, should just forget about it. As the integrated warfare ended, the cadets had to return to the starship docked in the space station. This time, the officers were accompanying them. In order to commend everyone, Gerard deliberately used his connections to get some wine from the garrison of Planet C, N300. CN300 to CN976 could be considered a military route. There was no danger, and it was fine as long as there were robots piloting the starship. Everyone drank a little crazily, and even Fu Luo, who usually didn't drink much, drank a little. Adding that to their tense nerves during this period of time, they all slept in their rooms until they landed after drinking. After landing at Planet CN976 camp and holding a summary meeting, the 10 teams returned to their respective academies. Sillin, Seven Lights held a banquet for us. Hard said excitedly while holding a microcomputer. The Sector Championship Forum was in a state of excitement right now, especially the people of Seven Lights. They raised their heads no matter where they went. In the past, they would subconsciously think that they were 3 points lower when they saw a military academy on the Sector Championship platform, but it was different now. They were the 2nd place, and no longer the eternal 5th place. The academy didn't even need to say anything. The students of Seven Lights had spontaneously held a welcoming banquet, and the higher-ups of Seven Lights had directly upgraded the 10 people's Seven Lights cards to green card rank. There were related events at Nightless City and the financial and trade zones, and the 10 people were invited to be their spokespersons. In short, the 10 people were on fire. Their graduation certificates would have a glittering symbol of the runner-up, and it was not something that the previous integrated warfare participants could compare to. There's even a photo of us in our uniforms. I'm going to post the photos of us on Planet C, and 300 later. It'll definitely charm a bunch of girls. We're even going to auction a specimen with our signature on it. Lung's eyes shone brightly. Lung had collected some plants and rocks on Planet C, and 300, made the plants into specimens, and had everyone else sign their names on them in preparation for the auction. The rocks should look pretty good if they were to bring them back to be processed. Amen, this time we're going to make a killing when we get back. When the time comes, I'm going to open a little shop at the financial district. You guys must come and support me, especially you, Sillin. You're going to dress up as Shadow X and act as the shop's mascot." Seeing Lung's excited look, Sillin smiled. "Sure." Not far away, C.I. Jincheng frowned slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with Sillin's smile. Moreover, the feeling that Sillin gave him during the integrated warfare this time was a little strange. Sillin's performance in the integrated warfare contest was more proactive than C.I. Jincheng had imagined. C.I. Jincheng was a man who was good at analysis, and those who were good at mathematics usually had stronger logical analysis abilities. He could infer things that no one else would know from small clues. Perhaps no one else would notice Sillin's smile just now, or they wouldn't think anything of it even if they did, but C.I. Jincheng couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen next. Hard, Copley and the others were looking forward to returning to Planet 7 Light. Through the Sector Championships network, they already knew what the current port looked like on Planet 7 Light. All kinds of slogans, all kinds of billboards with their images, all kinds of fresh flowers and beautiful women. The scene at the port had already been reflected on the forums. All that was left was for them to land. One had to admit that this kind of feeling was truly exciting. Copley wasn't the center of attention in the past. He didn't participate in that biohazard mission, and his influence in Seven Lights wasn't high either. But through this competition, everything about Copley had been dug out. His background, his various information, the courses he had chosen, the other honors he had obtained and so on were all known to everyone. In comparison, Knight was much calmer. Well, he couldn't say he was calm. It should be said that he didn't feel much at all. The integrated warfare contest was just a game in the first place, a game without life and death battles. Knight wanted to laugh the moment he saw the comments on the forums about how they were stronger than the military academies. Stronger? Stronger my ass. Sird, Copley, Hard and Pride might not even be able to survive in a true life and death battlefield. That was why Knight didn't put this game in his heart at all. Under the fervent and expectant gazes of the Seven Lights students, the spaceplane landed at the port. This time, it wasn't the training division's port, but Seven Lights' main port. Because there were too many students who requested to participate in the welcoming ceremony, Seven Lights decided to let the spaceplane land at the main port in order to make the welcoming scene a little more spectacular. At the same time, they could also spread this kind of atmosphere to others and attract more people to Seven Lights University. The elevator descended, and after the leader Gerard and his entourage came down, the participants of the integrated warfare contest came out one after another. Their blue uniforms and rainbow-patterned school insignia were especially eye-catching amidst the hubbub of voices. All kinds of close-up shots and videos from every angle were being streamed live on Seven Lights Network at the same time. Entertainment Sleepless City, Financial Trade Zone, Training Division, Research Division, School District, Dormitory District, and so on. Sillin was wearing a perfect smile, but Knight still had a straight face. There was even an impatient expression on his face. Pride still had his chin raised high, his arrogance obvious. C.I. Jincheng was very calm. Lung was smiling brightly and throwing kisses from time to time. Kong Man was a little nervous. Hard's smile was a little stiff. However, it was at this moment. The bullet pierced through the body, bringing with it a splash of blood. The video recording was transmitting everything as it happened to every part of Seven Light. Everything happened so suddenly. Chapter 80. Following Sillin's collapse, the students at the port began to scream. The excitement from before was completely gone, replaced by panic as they swarmed out of the port in large numbers. If not for the police department's control, stampedes, flying car collisions and other incidents would have happened one after another. In truth, the school had allowed a lot more people to enter the airport for the sake of publicity, so it was inconvenient for the security team and the training division to move around. However, since there had never been an assassination in public for the past 100 years, they had overlooked it. Gerard and the others were pushed to the side the moment they came down. Because the school had arranged for a ceremonial team to welcome the 10 participating students, Gerard and the others were blocked. That was why Gerard could not determine the attacker's location at first notice. Knight's body was trembling. He felt his throat being squeezed and oppressed. Knight had once been brought by his father to quell a rebellion. Although he did not truly come into contact with that cruel battlefield, he had watched from afar as people were sent flying, collapsed, and splattered with blood. It was just that it was not as painful as it was now. After all, he was not friends with those people, and the ones who had collapsed were his roommates and teammates who drank and carried guns with him. Be it Knight, Gerard, or the other people who were sent down from the military, none of them felt any killing intent at all. No killing intent, no killing intent. It was just a sudden shot. They were truly powerless, and they could not analyze the attacker's location in time. They did not find anything unusual from the surveillance footage sent over from various areas. Without hesitation, Lung took out a drug and injected it into the fallen Silen. He had always carried it with him to save his life in an emergency. The drug would stimulate the patient's life potential to the maximum, allowing the wounded to obtain greater vitality. After the injection, Lung immediately dialed a number. It was his private medical team in Seven Lights. They had the most advanced analyzers there. He would not put all his hopes on the people of Seven Lights. Fu Luo and the medical staff, who had rushed over, immediately performed first aid. She could tell at a glance that although the bullet did not hit the heart, it was very close to the heart. Under normal circumstances, Silen's condition should not be this bad. From the looks of it, there should be other substances in the bullet. After the bullet penetrated Silen's body, it hit the space plane behind it and swiftly disintegrated into powder. There was no way to analyze anything else from the bullet, but it was enough to show that this assassination was prepared. Since Lung had injected Silen with medicine as soon as the accident happened, Silen's vital signs were still relatively stable even before he was carried into the emergency cabin. However, he did not expect that on the way to the emergency room, his life signal would rapidly weaken. Before any effective measures could be taken, the life indicator showed that he was dead. Even so, the paramedics still sent Silen to the emergency room for resuscitation, but to no avail. Lung's private medical team also came over, but just like before, they were powerless to save the situation. The toxin was a kind of plant toxin that originated from Sector Z. It was hard to come by in the first place, and the antidote was also rare in the first place. However, the antidote's molecular formula was known, but by the time the antidote was synthesized, its life signal had already stopped. Nat had smashed several walls of the hospital. Although the people in the hospital were infuriated by Knight's bloodshot eyes and murderous aura, they dared not say anything in front of him. The rest of Seven Lights really did not dare to forcefully drag Knight and Lung, these two people who were brimming with killing intent. However, the duo had left hurriedly after receiving the communication. No one knew what had happened. Aflon, who had become the heir of the Duance family, had sent a message regarding Silen's assassination. Very soon, Aflon's men had come over to send Silen's body and belongings back. Knight and Lung had received C.I. Jincheng's call. Right now, all parties were investigating, but they still had no clue as to who the assassin was. There was no progress at all. The moment they heard that there was news from C.I. Jincheng, the duo quickly returned to the dormitory. C.I. Jincheng was sitting in the living room. He was the calmest person to react to today's incident. Knight was very dissatisfied with C.I. Jincheng's performance, and this dissatisfaction was directly manifested in his tone. "Speak." Lung did not speak and sat down on the sofa. His killing intent had not been concealed yet, but his complexion was very bad. Those who knew Lung would know that this kind of behavior meant that a storm of blood would soon follow. Lung had never been a kind person. C.I. Jincheng did not mind Knight's tone at all. Instead, he passed over his personal tablet. This is the message I've deciphered from the code Silin left behind. Take a look first. When Silin was shot, C.I. Jincheng was the closest to him, and it was obvious that this was not a coincidence. After Silin had collapsed, C.I. Jincheng had crouched next to him. At the time, C.I. Jincheng was also very worried and nervous, but when he saw the movements of Silin's fingers, he knew that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. That was also a type of code. It was different from the one Silin had used in the double combat tournament. It was a more complicated code. The former was faster, while the latter was more difficult to decipher. It required multidimensional decoding and matrix analysis. Silin's movements at the time were rather subtle. Even if the medical personnel saw it, they would only think that it was caused by a spasm. After reading the contents of the tablet, the killing intent on Knight and Lung's bodies receded, but their faces were a little twisted. Right now, they wanted nothing more than to drag Silin out of the hospital and give him a good whipping. Knight even purposely ran over to Silin's room to take a look. Fuck, there's nothing substantial at all. It was all prepared a long time ago. In the information on the tablet, Silin had only briefly explained that this matter had been arranged, and that they did not need to worry. Also, Silin Duance was also going to disappear from this world. The reason why he gave such an explanation was firstly because of trust. Silin had confidence in the trio. Secondly, if Silin did not say anything, these people would probably turn 7 lights, or even a couple of sectors into chaos. At the same time, at the research division, the chief Mo Heng had been locked inside the workshop ever since he returned from the hospital. Whenever the others recalled Mo Heng's ugly expression and low pressure when he returned, they immediately swallowed their words. Everyone thought that Mo Heng was sad because his beloved disciple was assassinated, but that was not the case. Mo Heng was in a very bad mood, but not because he was sad, but because he was depressed. He knew that something like this would happen to Silin a long time ago. Before Silin went to participate in the integrated warfare tournament, the machine he assembled had a password on it. It was something that only a machine member would understand, but even if a machine member knew it, they would not understand the meaning of the password. This was because the password was arranged according to a person's habit, and different people would see different information. Therefore, unless one knew the sequence of the password, they would only see a bunch of garbled code. From those passwords, Mo Heng learned of Silin's plan, and he also knew that Silin would leave just like this. Although Silin promised that he would contact Mo Heng in the future, Mo Heng still felt suffocated in his heart. Now that Silin had left, he could no longer boast openly. Kong Man, Hard and the others felt that the assassination of Silin was unreal. It was as if they still could not accept it. Just a moment ago, such a powerful and outstanding person was discussing the welcoming banquet with them, and in the next moment, he was gone just like that. To them, it must be said that it was a huge shock. Lung put up a bounty of 100 million to find the true culprit. Of course, this was just a cover. Otherwise, if something had really happened to Silin, with the temperament of young Master Lung's Andryra family bloodline, the bounty would not be just 100 million. Since the investigation had not made any progress, 7 Lights announced to the public that it might be Blackthorn's doing. This statement was given by Aflon of the Duance family, so 7 Lights followed it. Moreover, this statement could reduce 7 Lights' responsibility to the minimum, so the higher-ups of 7 Lights were happy to see it. 20 days later, on a starship at Sector D, a brawny young man with brown hair and a simple and honest-looking body walked into a room with a backpack on his back. The person inside had been waiting for a long time already. "Long time no see, Captain," the young man said with a simple and honest smile. "Welcome back, Silin." Chapter 81. There was another person in the room other than Shotten. It was a girl who looked to be around 6 or 7 years old. She was sucking on a lollipop and was engrossed in a gunfight game. She ignored Silen's entrance, and kept her eyes glued to the screen. The payment has been received. It looks like Aflon is very satisfied with this matter. Shotten flicked the card in his hand and said. Silen Duance had already disappeared from this world. Not even Aflon would know what Silen looked like right now. Aflon, who had obtained the position of heir, very generously gave out the payment. One portion was Silen's, and the other belonged to the sixth team. The payment this time alone was enough to cover the daily expenses of the 6th Division for an entire year. It had been almost a year since Silen accepted the mission. During this time, no one in the 6th Division knew of Silen's existence or whereabouts except for a few individuals. It was only when the mission was over that Shotten told Yudi, Carrie, and the others about Silen. This was because they had met Silen for the first time and they were also part of the Dia squad. They would continue to get along in the future. Who are you? The little girl who was playing raised her head to look at Silen after finishing a round. Her big sky-blue eyes were filled with vigilance and curiosity. Silen was also very curious. Shotten had actually brought this little girl with him. Could she be his illegitimate daughter? But it didn't look like it. Shotten smiled and pointed at Silen, introducing him to the little girl. This is Silen. Then he pointed at the little girl and said to Silen, This is the new member who joined not long ago, Tang Qiuqiu. Before Silen could be surprised by such a young new member, Tang Qiuqiu cried out, Impossible! Silen doesn't look like this. Silen pulled over a chair and sat down in front of her. I am Silen. Do you have any objections? You're not. Silen has light gray hair and his eyes aren't like yours. They don't look alike and Silen is thinner than you. Tang Qiuqiu said with certainty. I had plastic surgery. You're talking nonsense. I'm not talking nonsense. You're just talking nonsense. I'm not spouting nonsense. What about me? What makes you think I'm not Silen? Because I was the one who shot him. Tang Kukikiu roared angrily. Silen was shocked and looked at Shotten. Shotten nodded. Silen had always thought that the one who opened fire at Seven Lights Port would be Shotten, because Shotten had said that he would personally take action during their discussion. With the leader of Vanguard Division 6 personally taking action, it would be very difficult to track him down. Moreover, the incident was completed perfectly. Up until now, Seven Lights had yet to discover the suspect who fired the gun. But who would have thought that it would be this little girl who fired the gun? No wonder those people couldn't find the suspect. She was just an innocent and adorable little girl who was eating a lollipop in the crowd. Who would have thought that she would shoot someone? Qiuqiu, he really is Silen. He just changed his appearance, that's all. It's a mission. Shotten walked over and rubbed Tang Qiuqiu's head and said. Tang Qiuqiu scanned Silen from head to toe before jumping off the chair and circling around Silen twice. I don't feel like they're the same person at all. That's why I said he's an excellent hunter. Although Shotten didn't know how Silen had turned from his previous appearance to his current appearance, and Shotten couldn't quite believe that Silen had gone through plastic surgery on his entire body, these were his team members' secret, who didn't have a trump card up their sleeves. That was why he wouldn't ask too many questions. As long as the person was capable and had a trustworthy character, the 6th team would welcome them. I'll be even better than him in the future. Tang Qiuqiu returned to her seat and sat down. She unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth before continuing to play the game. Shotten gave her a look and gestured for Silen, said that they should talk in the adjacent hall. There are a couple of newbies other than you this time, and they're all from Dias's squad. Speaking of which, you should know them. You've already met Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile on the Sector Championship platform. Ba Zong's original name is Ba Dao, and Koi behind the smile's original name is Xiao Shang. They were sent to higher education institutions because their ages met the requirement. We may be hunters, but we're also cultured hunters. The moment Shotten mentioned Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile, Silen immediately knew that those two guys were pretty good. The other newbie who's also under Diaz is Tang Qiuqiu. When he mentioned Tang Qiuqiu, Shotten sighed heavily. She's from Sector V. Sector V was one of the more chaotic sectors among the 13 backward sectors. Because it was farther away from the other sectors that were more developed, it was ranked at the back of the 13 backward sectors. It was far worse than Silen's home Sector X. The livable planets were plagued by the flames of war all year round, and the situation there was even more complicated than that. The League of Stars' garrison at Sector V would not interfere, and they wouldn't act so early. At the very least, they would wait until the people there were almost done fighting before sending out their troops to suppress them. Since the development of civilization, when the people of Sector V came into contact with these high-end civilizations, they would divide into many factions and occupy an advantageous position through war. The foreign forces would infiltrate and provide them with weapons and wealth. At the same time, the invading forces would buy manpower and expand their territory. Moreover, there were many children in that sector who were reduced to war slaves from a young age. The first thing they picked up was not a spoon, a doll or a starship model, but a gun. The adults in the war zones would teach them how to use a gun and kill people. They would convince them that killing was the happiest thing in the world. There were many children who weren't even as tall as a gun when they killed their first person. Killing was to survive, and to them, it was like killing fish to eat. There wasn't much to it. Basically, the children of Sector V did not have the so-called innocence that belonged to that age. Instead, they had numb and empty eyes, and their lives might not even be as long as a G-rank genotype. This was especially true for girls. The slightly older teenage girls had to carry guns into battle, and were used as tools for men to vent their lust. In that case, Tang Qiuqiu should be one of them. Qiuqiu looks like she's only 6 or 7, but she's actually 8 already. She looks thinner and weaker than the average child due to early malnutrition. We met her when we went to Sector V to hunt down a prey. Diaz said that she was the only child he had seen in Sector V who wasn't dyed black by the smoke of war. At the time, none of our companions believed him, because when we saw Tang Qiuqiu, she was holding a gun and blowing up an adult's head expressionlessly. Shotten took out an electronic notebook and brought up a picture. This is Tang Qiuqiu at the time. Silen looked over. On the electronic notebook, there was a little girl with dry, messy hair and a face covered in dust. She was carrying an old rifle that was about the same length as her expressionlessly. The background was a street filled with blood type and violence, restlessness and noise. You know, Diaz may not be outstanding in other aspects, but he's a good judge of character. At the time, Diaz had tossed away his gun in front of Tang Qiuqiu and walked towards her with a kind smile. He signaled us not to follow, not to take out our guns, and it would be best if we didn't look in his direction. At the time, when we saw Qiuqiu pointing a gun at Diaz, if Diaz hadn't told us not to act rashly, we might have opened fire. At the time, we were so scared that we were drenched in sweat. When he said this, Shotten couldn't help but laugh. Diaz didn't pay attention to Qiuqiu's gun barrel. He walked in front of her and took out a few sugar balls he bought along the way to grind his teeth, and passed them to her. At first, Qiuqiu's eyes were filled with caution and suspicion. Then, Diaz picked up one of the sugar balls, peeled off the wrapper, and stuffed it into his mouth. He smacked his lips and chewed on it loudly. Perhaps it was the sweet smell of the fruit that attracted her. When Diaz peeled off the wrapper and passed it to her, she caught it and stuffed it into her mouth. After she stuffed the candy into her mouth, she smiled at Diaz. Shotten brought up another picture. Silen looked over. The electronic notebook still showed that face covered in dust, but the cold gaze from before was gone. It was a very clean smile. At that moment, those eyes were as free as the sky. Chapter 82. Diaz had bought Tang Qiuqiu from Sector V. In reality, a war slave of Tang Qiuqiu's age was worth less than 1,000 galactic credits. It could be said to be extremely cheap, and a lot of people from other sectors would buy war slaves from there. Due to the environment, these war slaves were basically cannon fodder. They basically had no names in the war zone, so after she was bought, Diaz had asked her to change her name. And so Tang Qiuqiu was born. Since everyone needed to complete a mission before they could officially join the team, Shotten had passed the assassination mission to Tang Qiuqiu after a series of tests and training. After all, Tang Qiuqiu's qualifications were much better than Shotten's. The team has been active in Sector T recently. Diaz's squad is hunting alien beasts. When you and Tang Qiuqiu arrive at the transit planet, you and Tang Qiuqiu will meet up with them. I'll return to the main starship directly. I have other matters to attend to over there. Shotten explained the following arrangements to Silen. As the 6th Division's captain, Shotten was very busy. All right, I understand. The remuneration you receive belongs to you yourselves. The team will not ask for additional bonuses. Buy whatever you want. You can be considered a little rich now, Shotten said with a smile. It was true that Silen had gotten a lot of money from Aflon for this mission. In total, it was almost 100 million galactic credits. This was something he and Shotten did not expect at first. Before they arrived at Sector T, Silen and Tang Qiuqiu played a little gunfight since they had nothing to do. It had to be said that the kids who grew up in Sector V were different from the rest. Not only were they decisive when firing a gun, their judgment was also very accurate. Otherwise, Shotten wouldn't have let her be the shooter. As long as the target wasn't moving at high speed and was within her shooting range, Tang Qiuqiu could be said to be 100% accurate. After coming into contact with the 6th team, Tang Qiuqiu had met a lot of great shooters. She had been exposed to all kinds of gun models. At the same time, she had learned very quickly. She had mastered almost every type of gun as soon as she got a hold of it. Children at this age had a very strong learning ability. However, she seemed to learn things that she shouldn't have learned very quickly. F***ck. What the hell? Puff Shotten, who was enjoying his tea, spat out a mouthful of tea. Silen looked at Shotten speechlessly. This sentence coming from the mouth of an 8-year-old child was too shocking. Moreover, it was a girl. Who taught her this? However, the person who spoke didn't seem to realize it at all. He was still sucking on his lollipop and frowning at the screen. Ahem, Tang Qiuqiu, girls should be more refined. Shotten didn't know what to say. He had no experience in teaching children. Tang Qiuqiu was puzzled. Can't I say this? Big brother Xiao Shang often says this. Xiao Shang, you're asking for a beating. It's fine if you say it normally, but how dare you say such nonsense in front of a child? Shotten gritted his teeth. Silen, when you see that B***tch Xiao Shang, punish him. Yes, sir. Shotten turned around and straightened his face. Tang Qiuqiu, Xiao Shang and the others can say that, but you can't. It's not good for a girl to say that. Tang Qiuqiu frowned. But it feels quite exciting. Exciting my *SS? Shotten almost cursed out loud, but he retracted his words in a daze. A single mistake may cause everlasting sorrow. Xiao Shang, your sins have deepened yet again. Diaz's squad loved to act like hooligans the most. As the saying goes, a crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. If even Diaz behaved like that, then there was no need to even mention the rest of the squad. Carrie and Xiao Shang would always spout nonsense whenever they ran into each other. However, Tang Qiuqiu chose to stay in Diaz's squad. She refused to go to any other squad at all. Such a beautiful flower wasn't dyed black in the smoke of Sector V, but died in the 6th squad instead. Shotten dared not imagine what kind of person Tang Qiuqiu would become in an environment where hooligan words flew everywhere. Shotten said seriously, Tang Qiuqiu, it's not beautiful for a girl to say such things. However, Tang Qiuqiu's frown grew deeper. Her expression clearly said, what is beautiful? Why must it be beautiful? Both Shotten and Silen fell silent. That's right. In Sector V, everything other than life and death were fleeting clouds. Beauty and ugliness were all equal after a single shot. Ahem, Tang Qiuqiu, are you unhappy about losing? Shotten changed the topic and stopped dwelling on that sentence. The next time he saw Xiao Shang, he was definitely going to give that kid a good beating. The moment the topic was brought up, Tang Qiuqiu pouted, I lost by 1 point. Tang Qiuqiu did not have this many expressions when she was still at Sector V, but after she came into contact with the 6th Squad, her expressions gradually became richer. When she saw some children pouting when they were dissatisfied or conflicted on TV or in magazines, she followed suit. Diaz even recorded a video of Tang Qiuqiu practicing pouting in front of a mirror. It was very funny but also somewhat sour. You lost by 10 points at the beginning, but haven't you been losing less and less in the last few rounds? You've improved a lot. Although Silin had gone easy on her, he could clearly feel Tang Qiuqiu's improvement. Her absorption ability was too strong, and her adjustment speed was too fast. Tang Qiuqiu did not speak. She bit down on the lollipop as fiercely as if it was Silin, crunching loudly. One more round. Tang Qiuqiu rolled up her sleeves and prepared for battle. We'll talk about it next time. We still need to find the Lieutenant Commander and the others after we reach Sector V. Alright, let's go find Brother Diaz first. We'll compete to see who can hunt more alien beasts then. Maybe we'll catch up and hunt more than Carrie and the others. Yeah, and there's that slut brother Xiao Shang too. Shotten, who was walking out of the door, stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. As expected, words should not be spoken carelessly. Tang Qiuqiu, slut isn't a good word. Girls shouldn't say it carelessly. Seeing Silin and Shotten's serious expressions, Tang Qiuqiu continued to pout. Fine, I won't say it. After entering Sector T's transit planet, TC-100, Shotten separated from them. Someone was to receive him back to the main starship, while Silin and Tang Qiuqiu bought a flight to planet TH-001. Now that Silin and Tang Qiuqiu both had new IDs, it was not difficult for Vanguard to obtain such legal IDs. The flight was still more than half a day away, so Silin brought Tang Qiuqiu to eat a good meal first. Tang Qiuqiu's appetite was larger than the average child of her age, but she was not a picky eater. Moreover, she would try her best to finish everything she ordered. After experiencing true hunger, Tang Qiuqiu did not like to waste food. Silin looked at the time. There were still more than 5 hours before the flight. He brought up the surrounding map and looked at it. Then, he said to Tang Qiuqiu, who was drinking fruit juice, Qiuqiu, there's still 5 hours before the flight departs. How about we go for a walk? There's an amusement park nearby. We'll be done after a while, so we don't have to sit here and do nothing. Tang Qiuqiu's eyes lit up the moment she heard amusement park. She had only seen it on television and magazines, and had never experienced it herself. Seeing the children in the video seemed to be having a good time, Tang Qiuqiu was tempted as well. Alright, let's go to the amusement park. Tang Qiuqiu carried a glass of fruit juice out of the restaurant with Silin and took a taxi to the amusement park. Chapter 83. I want that! Tang Qiuqiu looked excitedly at the variety of candies displayed on the counter. These candies were exquisitely packaged, and the cute boxes were more attractive to children than the candies inside. But why was she referring to the poop green dinosaur and not the pink bunny dolls beside it? However, this was a vending machine, and there was no human salesperson. If there was, the salesperson would definitely look at Tang Qiuqiu strangely. Since Tang Qiuqiu liked it, Silin wouldn't say much. After swiping the card, he took out the poop green dinosaur candy box and handed it to Tang Qiuqiu. Tang Qiuqiu took it excitedly. Why did you choose this? The little animal boxes beside it are cuter. Silin asked. Because it looks like a miantuan. Tang Qiuqiu smiled happily. The miantuan was Yudi's weird mutated chameleon. After playing around for a while, an ordinary child would have been tired to the point of collapsing. However, although Tang Qiuqiu looked thin and weak, her physical strength was extraordinary. After 3 hours, she was still full of energy. Silin let Tang Qiuqiu ride on his neck, so that Tang Qiuqiu could see the scene in the distance. Now, Silin's body was obviously much thicker, and with Tang Qiuqiu's small figure, it looked a little warm. Oh, what's that? Tang Qiuqiu rode on Silin's neck, one hand holding Silin's head, and the other pointing in a direction. Silin looked in the direction she was pointing, and there was a big cotton candy balloon floating there. That's cotton candy. In fact, the word cotton candy was floating next to the balloon, but Tang Qiuqiu only recognized the word candy. When she was at Sector V, she was basically illiterate, and even the language she spoke was the native language of that place. She had very little contact with the League of Stars common language, and although she had learned some after joining the 6th team, she wasn't familiar with it. That was why Tang Qiuqiu would always memorize what others said and enrich her own language. The marshmallow seller was surrounded by many children. They were drooling as they looked at the cute marshmallows on display. They pulled the adults beside them and asked to buy them. "Which one do you like?" Silin asked. Since Tang Kukikiu was riding on Silin's neck, she could see all the marshmallows on his neck clearly. "That!" Tang Kukikiu pointed at a cotton candy that was making a funny face. "Boss, I want the one that makes faces. Also, make one custom-made just like us." "Alright, but it will take about 10 minutes. "Alright." Silin paid the money first. These marshmallows were all freshly made and sold like hotcake. They were bought almost immediately after they were made, and some of the people waiting had chosen to have them custom-made. At first, Silin wanted to take Tang Qiuqiu to other places for a spin, but Tang Qiuqiu didn't want to leave. She just wanted to watch how the man made the marshmallows. When the surrounding children saw Tang Qiuqiu riding on Silin's neck, they pestered the adults beside them to do the same. Tang Qiuqiu glanced at them and smiled brightly. When they returned to the airport, Tang Qiuqiu chewed on the marshmallows all the way. Silin carried a big bag full of marshmallows in his hand. Of course, there was also a bottle of tooth protector. Otherwise, Tang Qiuqiu's teeth would go bad if she ate the way she did. It didn't take long for Tang Qiuqiu to fall asleep on the TC-100 to TH-001 flight. She had too much fun today, and she was a child after all. She needed rest. When she fell asleep, there was still a smile on the corner of Tang Qiuqiu's lips, and she was hugging the dinosaur candy box in her arms. Silin pressed a button next to the seat, and a panel popped out. Then, Silin began flipping through the magazines on it. There were a lot of things reported in the electronic magazines recently, and Silin saw things about him while he was flipping through them. Assassination of the Duance family's heir's son. 7 Lights genius assassinated. Many of the details in the magazines had been diluted. They did not mention 7 Lights' negative influence, and many of them even absolved 7 Lights of responsibility. This meant that the higher-ups of 7 Lights had done their best. The title alone was enough to shock anyone, but there wasn't much description. There wasn't even an image or video, and it was heavily diluted. Even Silin's name did not appear, and only replaced it with the Duance family's heir's son. It looked like Aflon had taken care of it himself. This matter was also linked to another matter regarding the Duance family. Aflon had used iron and blood to deal with the people inside the family, and blamed the assassination on them as well. He used the assassination as an excuse to make people think that Aflon was standing on the side of reason. After they arrived at planet TH-001, they would have to change to another passenger ship if they wanted to meet up with Dias and the others. There were many small passenger ships docked at planet TH-001's main port, and they were all heading to different planets. In Sector T, planets that began with H were all hunting planet. These planets were not habitable planets for humans, and were basically the world of beasts. Hunters liked to come here to hunt, and then transport their prey to be sold to buyers. The beasts on the planets in this region were all very special, and most of them were treasures from head to toe. Their skin, fur, horns, teeth, bones and so on were all very popular outside. However, in order to ensure that the alien beasts in this region could continue to survive, the League of Stars had made a pact that forbade the use of weapons of mass destruction, radioactive weapons, or the destruction of the environment on these planets. Sometimes, hunters would be fined if they accidentally used some slightly heavier weapons and destroyed a certain mountain or a certain forest. In serious cases, they might even be sent to prison. Dias's squad's hunting spot was at planet TH-036. When Silen and Tang Qiuqiu arrived there on the passenger starship, they immediately saw the familiar starship docked at the spaceport. The big dagger symbol on the starship was very eye-catching, and it was also a reminder to those rascals that they would have to think twice before trying anything funny. At this time, the squad's starship should only have the staff who stayed behind to guard it, and the core members should have gone hunting on the planet. But coincidentally, a spaceplane flew out of the planet at this time and entered the starship. When Silen and Tang Qiuqiu entered the starship, they saw Carrie commanding the people to unload things from the spaceplane. Qiuqiu, you're back. Carrie walked over. He was going to hug Qiuqiu, but he gave up in the end when he saw the red and blue alien blood on his body. Seeing Carrie looking at him with a puzzled expression, Silen smiled and said, "Long time no see, Carrie." Carrie grew even more puzzled. He was sure that he had never seen this person in front of him before. This person looked stupid. Tang Qiuqiu giggled. It looked like she wasn't the only one who couldn't recognize him. He's Big Brother Silen. The fact that Tang Qiuqiu was able to add the word Big Brother behind Silen's name meant that she had now acknowledged Silen. Previously, she would just call him Silen or not. Silen? Carrie's jaw dropped as he looked around, then he said in realization, "No wonder the vice captain said you've changed a layer of skin." Chapter 84. The spaceplane Carrie drove over was loaded with the results of their hunt. The skin and bones of various exotic beasts had already been processed and sorted. The starship's logistics staff would deal with these things further. After the goods were unloaded, Carrie drove the spaceplane back to the planet. Silen and Tang Qiuqiu followed along. Tang Qiuqiu had been holding back for a long time. She had been playing with her gun on the spaceplane. Tang Qiuqiu's gun had been modified. The body of the gun was lighter, and the recoil wasn't as strong as the guns she used in the past. However, its lethality was much stronger than the old rifles she used in the past. There were some bullets on the side. Laser-type firearms would burn the skin and fur of exotic beasts, and they wouldn't be sold for a high price. Laser-type firearms weren't very safe in dry forests, and could easily attract the attention of exotic beasts. Therefore, hunters preferred to use modified bullets. Some of these bullets were specially used to capture living creatures. The bullets would be filled with drugs, and after hitting the prey, the bullets would dissolve in the blood and release the drugs. Taking advantage of this time, Carrie took out thermal clothes for Silen and Tang Qiuqiu to wear, and explained the situation on the ground. Although there were many species on this planet, the environmental conditions weren't that optimistic for humans. The temperature was below zero all year round. Most of the exotic beasts on this planet had thick fur or scales, and they were very fierce. Some of the seemingly harmless animals were actually even more ferocious. Normally, beasts in cold and warm regions tend to be larger in size. The cats here are about the size of leopards in other sectors. Carrie said blabbermouth. Tang Qiuqiu tilted her head. How do you know they're cats and not leopards? One night, I heard them meowing. Silen didn't wait for Carrie to finish and immediately covered Carrie's mouth. It was better not to use that word in front of a child. Carrie didn't understand at first why Silen wanted to stop him from speaking. Wasn't it just cats meowing in heat? But when he looked at Tang Qiuqiu's inquisitive gaze, he immediately understood. Yes, a leopard's cry is different from a cat's, Carrie said with a serious expression. Tang Qiuqiu thought for a moment. That made sense and didn't continue on this topic. Silen and Carrie looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Things were really different with a child in the team. They still had to keep their mouths shut in front of her. The spaceplane landed in front of a 3-story building. A similar spaceplane was parked around the building, and someone was loading goods into it. This time, it was basically filled with living creatures, stored in specially made cages. Because they had been injected with medicine, those exotic beasts were all lying in the cages dispiritedly. Carrie pointed at an animal that looked like a squirrel but was 3 times bigger than an ordinary squirrel and said, "Look, aren't they cute like this? Furry." Girls loved this kind of fur the most, especially when they looked into his black eyes. It was easy to feel pity for him. Seeing Tang Qiuqiu looking at the animals, Carrie went over and asked, "Do you like them?" Seeing that Tang Qiuqiu was staring at the animals, Carrie moved closer and asked, "Do you like them? There's a type with white fur that's even cuter. Many rich ladies like them." Tang Qiuqiu frowned. "What's the point of keeping them?" Carrie was about to say that they were being kept for fun, but he swallowed his words back down. If he said that, Tang Qiuqiu would definitely reply, "Then I'll sell them for money. The money I get from selling them can buy a lot of candies." If he said that, Tang Qiuqiu would definitely reply, "Then let's sell them for money. The money we earn from selling them can buy a lot of candy." This kind of animal would only be lethal when it was wild, and once it was domesticated, it would basically become a soft egg. Those rich ladies were just keeping them for fun. When they had nothing to do, they would touch, hug, and tease them purely for fun. In terms of intelligence, these animals were far inferior to Yudi's mischievous Miantuan lizard. Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Silen patted Tang Qiuqiu. "Get ready, let's go hunting." Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Silen patted Tang Qiuqiu and said, "Get ready, let's go hunting." "Okay, let's go hunting." At the mention of hunting, Tang Qiuqiu didn't care whether Carrie answered the question and followed Silen out. "Hey wait, I'll go with you." As soon as Silen came out, he saw Beaver calculating something with his fingers. "What's the matter, Beaver? What happened?" Beaver looked up. "Yo, Silen, you're back." Carrie was depressed, and Tang Qiuqiu was disappointed. Beaver could actually recognize Silen. Actually, Beaver had seen the image of Silen's new face sent by Shotten, so he wasn't as surprised as Carrie. His surprise period was over. "It's nothing, I'm looking for other places with more exotic beasts." "Oh, are you guys going to look for the vice captain? He's in this position." Beaver brought up the image and pointed at one of the spots. After transferring the map, Silen, Tang Qiuqiu, and Carrie set off. The 3 of them took a small airship and headed in Dias's direction. Looking down from the airship, the planet's unique cold-resistant coniferous forest belt and some evergreen trees were everywhere. From time to time, they could see a black shadow flashing through the forest, but it was not the prey they were looking for, so they did not bother with it. Dias was currently tracking a group of polar bears, whose fur could be sold for a large sum of money. In this era of high-tech materials, people's pursuit of such primitive fur was even crazier. The higher ones stood at the top of the pyramid, the more they liked these things. In the eyes of the noblewomen, the rare primitive animal fur was equal to precious jewelry, or even more so. The airship's radar showed the creatures in the surroundings, but Silen didn't completely rely on the radar. He used his eyes to see and ears to listen. This was his habit. Caw 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 caw. A flock of birds flew in the forest, their cries a little frightening. From the radar's information, there were only a few kittens and wolves. Carrie didn't care about them, so he didn't care. Hunting them was purely a waste of bullet. Silen's ears twitched and he suddenly said, "Carrie, stop." "What's wrong?" asked Carrie as he slowed down the airship. Silen took his backpack and said, "I'll go down and take a look. You guys go meet up with the vice captain first." "Hey, what's so good about those things? This is just the periphery of the forest. There's nothing good." "It's okay. I'll just go take a look. You guys go first." Silen took out a hoverboard from the airship's equipment compartment and unfolded it. "I'll catch up with you guys later." After saying that, Scylla stepped on the hoverboard and flew down the airship. This kid is really. Carrie shook his head and sped up the airship and left. This kid is really. Licking her lollipop, Tang Chio asked, "Where's Brother Scylla going? Isn't there no good prey over there?" "Who knows? That guy probably had a seizure," Carrie said without thinking. "What's a seizure?" Carrie. After a pause, Carrie answered cautiously, "It's a kind of cramp." Chapter 85. After Scylla landed on the hoverboard in the forest, he put away the hoverboard and put it back into his backpack. He took out a bottle of medicine and sprayed it on his body, causing his aura to be almost the same as his surroundings. Then, he stuffed his backpack into a crack in the rock. He snuck towards the direction of the surprised flock of birds. If Carrie had done a sound spectrum analysis with an instrument at the time, he would have discovered a strange waveline. There was a sound that was different from the cries of animals mixed in with the cries of the birds and cat. It sounded a little like a machine, but it was also different from a machine. It was exactly because of this that Scylla wanted to investigate. He couldn't shake the feeling that he would discover something. Scylla slowly groped his way forward. The animals here were different from humans. Their hearing was very sensitive, so Scylla had to be even more careful. If he wanted to know the truth, then he must conceal himself. Although he had sprayed himself with the medicine, Scylla had purposely chosen a position against the wind just to be on the safe side. This way, even his aura would not be easily discovered by the animals upwind. The leaves rustled as the wind blew past them, and some needles fell from time to time. It was just a tiny sound, but it was enough to help Scylla conceal the sound of his sneak attack. Gradually, Scylla could hear a few low growls from the other side, and the warning whines of the cats. Further ahead, Scylla saw the situation on the other side. There were 6 wolves, 4 cats, and a kitten surrounded by 3 big cats. The kitten looked dispirited, its eyes were closed, and its breathing was relatively weak. It was just as Carrie had said. The cats here looked like leopards, and the kitten's size could be considered normal in comparison. The contrast of being surrounded by 3 big cats was too obvious. The cats were big, but the wolves were even bigger. Have you ever seen a wolf the size of a bear? In any case, this was the first time Scylla had seen one. However, he had seen a rat the size of a bear back at 7 Lights, so he was not surprised here. But what puzzled Scylla was why the 6 wolves would hesitate in front of the 3 cats, and ignore the kitten. Logically speaking, be it in terms of size or number, the wolves had the absolute advantage. They shouldn't be hesitating like this, as if they wanted to charge but were afraid of something. Something was wrong. Scylla held his breath as he watched the scene. He had a nagging feeling that something was wrong, but he could not find anything out of the ordinary. There was no mechanical activity, no energy fluctuations, only these few animals. One of the wolves growled in a low voice and took a step forward. The fur on the 3 big cats' bodies immediately stood up. Before, it was only the fur on their backs that stood up, but now they felt like their whole bodies were in a state of tension. Their tails were straightened, and because of the fur standing up, they looked a lot bigger. At the same time, the 3 big cats took half a step back, getting closer to the kitten in the circle. The wolf did not continue to move forward. Instead, it anxiously circled the area, its claws scratching at the ground that was frozen hard due to the low temperature like tofu. Perhaps it was because of the wolf's low growl and the sound of its claws scratching the ground, or the 3 big cats whimpering because of nervousness. The kittens surrounding them struggled to open their eyes. The kitten was leaning against a rock that was not much bigger than it was. There were some primitive ferns in the cracks of the rock. When it opened its eyes, the first thing it did was not look at the big cats or the 6 wolves, but at the few small ferns in the cracks of the rock. The kitten opened its mouth, revealing its fine teeth. It was indeed no different from an ordinary cat, unlike the big cats, whose teeth were ferocious. It bit at the leaves that stretched out from the cracks of the rock, clawed its paws, closed its eyes, and dropped its head. It continued its original appearance, as if biting the leaves had consumed a lot of energy. Scylla narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. Just now, when the kitten opened its mouth, the 6 wolves showed obvious signs of cowering. The wolf in the front even retreated to stand with its companions, as if that was the only way it could regain some courage and peace of mind. Previously, he thought that the 3 big cats had surrounded the kitten to protect it, but the truth was that the 3 big cats were afraid. Since they were so close to the kitten, what the 6 wolves were really afraid of was not the 3 big cats, but the sickly kitten lying there, right? Scylla continued to observe for a while, but there was still no progress on the other side. Could not go on like this. In order to verify the speculation in his heart, Scylla turned his hand, took out a needle, and shot it at one of the wolves. The conflict had to be intensified in order to better resolve this conflict. While they were confronting each other, the wolf that was shot in the butt suddenly jumped up and howled. It wasn't because of pain, but because of fear. The wolf's fur was very thick, and Scylla's needle did not penetrate much of it. However, the highly nervous wolf reflexively jumped a step forward when it felt the pain on its butt. The other wolves behind it seemed to have received the encouragement and jumped forward as well. When the 3 big cats saw that they had actually rushed forward, they also decided to fight to the death. The situation instantly became chaotic. And because of this, Scylla saw a shocking scene. The kitten that was originally lying on the ground, making people feel that it was exhaling more than it was inhaling, suddenly had its head expand, and it was even bigger than the wolf's body. The originally gray fur contracted and changed, and its skin revealed a metallic luster. At this moment it did not look like an animal at all, but more like a mechanical body. No, it should be a combination of a mechanical body and an animal, because except for this strange mechanical head, its torso and limbs still maintained the original shape of the kitten. The swollen mechanical cat head opened its mouth and swallowed the nearest wolf in one gulp. Then, the mechanical cat head slowly changed back to its original state, and the metallic luster disappeared. Its fur reappeared, and it returned to its original appearance, lying there half dead and half alive, continuing to be weak. When the kitten transformed, the 6 wolves wanted to immediately escape from the battle, but the one closest to it didn't have time to escape and suffered a disaster. The other 5 fled 50 meters away with their tails between their legs, panting heavily. Scylla was speechless. Damn, this guy is King Kong. Although it is not pure, that appearance just now is definitely a mechanical body. Cyborg life form? Scylla had read some articles in electronic journals with high contribution point. Some people mentioned cyborg life forms, but these life forms were very unstable and could only survive for a very short period of time. Many researchers had thought of creating such a cyborg life form, but the results were not as good as expected. Apart from the shortcoming of a naturally formed cyborg life form, the transition between carbon-based life form and mechanical life form was almost perfect. Artificial cyborg life forms could not achieve such perfection, and they were either above or below the balance point. Someone had once speculated on the possible cause of cyborgs' formation in one of Gal's 2 giant publications, Code, but the explanation was very vague. Perhaps it was because Scylla's reading clearance wasn't high enough, and he wasn't able to access the true research secrets. Researchers described this cyborg life form as a miracle in the universe. The core of this life form was a certain matter that was accidentally formed in the universe. This matter could not be replicated, and when it floated to a planet with life, this matter would capture the genetic information of a certain creature. Then, using this genetic information as a template, it would form a similar life form, which was what they called cyborg life form. The universe was a place that produced all kinds of miracles. Scylla didn't know how it was formed, and he didn't know if the researchers had created a perfect cyborg, but the one in front of him was definitely a cyborg that had transformed into a perfect cyborg. Chapter 86. Now, it had returned to what Scylla had seen at the beginning, except that there was one less wolf. The kitten was still lying there dispiritedly, its tail barely moving. However, Serene did not dare to underestimate this fellow now. He was not confident that he could win against a half-living creature that could swallow a wolf in one gulp. But was this semi-living cat really sick, or was it just pretending to be sick? If it was really sick, the speed at which it swallowed the wolf was simply lightning fast. If it were not for Selen's good eyesight, which allowed him to capture such a fast movement and some of the details, the scene just now would have looked like a gray shadow flashing and the wolf disappeared. If it was pretending to be sick, it really did look sick and extremely dispirited. If it was in good spirits, these wolves would probably be buried in its stomach. In order to figure out the cat's situation, Selen decided to wait and see. Knowing that the cat was a semi-living creature, Selen did not dare to act rashly. But reality did not go as Selen wished. The kitten, who was lying down dispiritedly, suddenly raised its head and opened its eyes. Unlike its previous confused look, its eyes were wide open, and its pupils had shrunk into a long and narrow line. And the place it was looking at was the direction where Selen was. It seemed to be very excited. This time, it was not just its head, but its whole body began to change, distort, and transform. But it was only in the process of transformation, and it could not be fixed. Its fur and metal luster alternated between mechanical changes, and its body size was sometimes small and sometimes big. It was extremely strange. Seeing the semi-mechanical cat stand up with its trembling limbs, but it could not take a step, Selen now believed that this guy was indeed weak. Perhaps it was as the researchers said, naturally formed semi-mechanical life forms could not have a long life. They were not stable enough, and this cat was very obvious. It could smoothly transform between mechanical and carbon-based life forms, but now it could not stabilize even one of them. Previously, this cat had maintained its carbon-based life form because its carbon-based body consumed less energy and lasted longer than a mechanical body. As soon as they saw the cat in such a state, the remaining 5 wolves immediately ran away. The strange cat gave them a very dangerous feeling. In addition to the 5 wolves, the 3 big cats also retreated while trembling. After seeing the wolves leave, they also ran away, leaving the cat that could change its shape without a fixed shape alone. Selen did not move. In that instant, he suddenly had a very familiar feeling. The AI chip in his body was excited again. At the same time, he felt that something was about to break out of the cocoon. Selen looked at the leaf pattern on Jenya's finger. There was something moving restlessly inside. It was that white ball. The cyborg cat stared straight at Selen, who was 100 meters away. It lifted its leg with difficulty, and its body swayed. After stabilizing itself, it continued to move in Selen's direction. With every step the cyborg cat took, Selen could feel that the white ball's restlessness became more intense. Surprisingly, the more the cyborg cat moved, the more energetic it seemed. Selen could just pull out his gun and shoot it, but his intuition told him not to. If he did, he would definitely be the one to die. Like 2 magnets attracting each other, Selen's left hand was already raised uncontrollably. There was a domineering force on his left thumb that was pulling him in that direction. Selen gritted his teeth and stabilized his body, but the force was too strong. Selen's feet scraped against the ground as he was pulled in that direction. As if dissatisfied with this state, the leaf pattern on Selen's left thumb began to twist in a spiral, forcibly tearing this subspace apart. The white ball flew out from inside, flew directly toward the cyborg cat, and then disappeared into its body. There was no dazzling white light, nor was there a loud explosion. There was only the cyborg cat lying there, transforming. However, Selen knew that this was not all. Because of the chip, he felt that something was wrong. The electromagnetic waves and charged particles around him were all changing. At the same time, all the communication equipment on planet TH-036 was cut off. All the power transmission networks were also paralyzed. Even the solar panels could not be used. Dias was planning a strategy to hunt the polar bears, but he found that his communicator had suddenly lost signal. Strangely, the polar bears that were roaring arrogantly on the hillside earlier were now lying on the ground, trembling. Dias and the others also felt a little uncomfortable. It was as if their minds were being disturbed by invisible sound waves. However, all the instruments could not be used, so there was no way to find out the reason. The satellites and aircrafts outside planet TH-036 were also affected to some extent. The satellites could not send signals or monitor the ground, and the magnetic and ray analysis instruments could not be used. They could not contact the ground or other planet. Before this, no high-energy particles, rays, or magnetic field abnormalities had been detected at all. Some people said that it might be a stellar flare, but planet TH-036 was relatively far from the star it was orbiting. Otherwise, the temperature would not be so low. There were many planets closer to planet TH-036, but they had never heard of such a thing happening. Of course, it was also possible that the same thing was happening now, but the communication was disrupted before they could say anything about it. No matter what, at this stage, they had to analyze how long this abnormality would last. Only then could they come up with countermeasures. However, without some of the analysis instruments, it was not very possible to get an answer in a short period of time. In the forest on the ground, Scylla looked at the cyborg that was still lying on the ground, unable to stabilize. He did not go closer to take a look. He did not have the confidence to block a blow from such a powerful lifeform, even if he was in a solidified state. After about an hour, the cyborg cat's form gradually stabilized. It was still a small cat, but it looked full of energy. Unlike the previous dispirited state, its gray fur was also bright, reflecting light under the natural light. When the cyborg cat stabilized, the communication equipment on the planet also recovered and began to operate normally. The cat looked up at Scylla. There was no malice in its eyes, but Scylla would not let his guard down because of this. He maintained a state of vigilance. As long as this fellow made the slightest movement, Scylla would definitely escape immediately. What a joke! Trying to fight against such a cyborg life form? Was he looking for sh*t? When the cat was within 50 meters of him, Scylla warned, "If you go any further, I'll kill you." Usually, when Scylla really wanted to shoot, he would not say such nonsense. He just wanted to remind the cat to keep its distance, but he was not sure if it would understand. Hearing Scylla's words, the huemau stopped and squatted on the ground. It pulled its ears back and revealed a very disdainful look. What a bad temper! Scylla. It spoke? It really spoke. Chapter 87. Scylla stared at the cat that was looking at him with disdain. He really did not remember reading about cyborg life forms that could speak. However, it could also be because he had not come into contact with the real core content of the research. In any case, this kind of life form was really amazing. I didn't expect you to be able to speak. I learned it more than 100 years ago. The cat raised its hand, raised its paw and pointed in a direction. I remember there weren't that many buildings back then. There was only one landing spot on the entire planet. This planet was allowed to be open to hunting by the League of Stars more than 100 years ago. At that time, there were indeed not many human buildings. The direction that the cat's paw was pointing at was where their aircraft had landed. I didn't expect you to live for so long, Scylla lamented. Of course. Although I don't know how long I can live, it feels like I haven't grown much after all these years. Huemau was very dissatisfied that Scylla doubted its lifespan. Then what happened to you just now? Was that sickly and weak state that you were in? Was it an illusion? Scylla said with disdain. There will always be a period of time every 10 years or so. During that period I will become weak and unstable. These two states are very difficult to control, and I will also emit an electromagnetic wave that will attract many hostile species to attack me. Those wolves just now were one of them. Scylla suddenly understood. So that was it. They were unstable, but that did not mean that their lifespan was short. The short lifespan that the researchers mentioned was actually when they were periodically weak. If they attracted a stronger species to attack them, they would definitely die. The cat was still talking to itself. Before, I didn't understand why I would emit that kind of electromagnetic wave uncontrollably, but now I know that it's to attract that white ball. I don't know what it is, but I know that the white ball is useful to me. It can stabilize this chaotic and unstable state. Scylla could not feel the existence of the white ball anymore. It seemed that the coincidental formation of cyborg life forms also included the white ball. Cyborg life forms that did not fuse with the white ball could change between the two states perfectly, but they would not be able to maintain a stable state. I feel like you and I are the same kind. The cat looked at Scylla. When it came to this world, it knew that it was different from the living beings around it, but now Scylla gave it a very strange feeling, an inexplicable sense of familiarity. I'm a normal carbon-based life form, a pure human, pure, Scylla affirmed. I know you're human, so I'm just saying it feels like. Sigh, why don't you follow me? Now that I'm stable, I won't be as weak as before. I'm standing at the top of this planet. Not interested. Scylla walked back. He'd better get his bag and look for Dias and the others. Hey, don't go. Do you want me to follow you? The cat ran behind Selene eagerly. Scylla stopped and looked at the cat. This time, he didn't ask it to stop and let the cat walk in front of him. You want to leave? Yes, I'm tired of staying here. I want to go out and broaden my horizons. You can go find other people. There are many people who come here to hunt, or you can sneak into one of the spaceships and go on a free vacation. No, no. The cat shook its head vigorously. They're not reliable. Either they're too weak or their character is bad. Scylla squatted down and looked at the gray cat in front of him seriously. Speaking of which, you did remind me of something. What? I went through a lot of trouble to get that white ball. If I sold it to those crazy researchers, I might be able to get a few $100 million, but you took it from me. No matter what, you have to compensate me. You can follow me, but you have to pay your debt. Pay my debt? Yes. Scylla took out a knife and scratched some numbers on the ground. You know the polar bears on this planet, right? The kind that can sell for about 10,000 galactic credits each. If the money you owe me is converted into polar bears, it'll be no less than 10,000. Of course, some exotic beasts are more valuable. Some are worth more than 1 million each. That way you'll save more effort. At this point, Scylla paused and looked suspiciously at the cat in front of him, who was staring at the ground and listening to him. Of course, maybe you can't deal with that kind of exotic beast. Can't deal with it? It raised its claws. I'll prove it to you. Let me tell you, I've never seen a beast that could withstand 2 of my claws. If it's just a show of swallowing a wolf, then forget it. That's just to show that you have a big appetite. That'll cost me more money. The cat snorted through its nose and looked at its surroundings. Then, it swept its gaze across Scylla once before raising its paw and pointing at its own head. Take out your gun and point it at me. Scylla didn't say much. A cyborg should be very powerful. Who knows, it might really be able to carry guns and block cannons. Bang! A gunshot. The cat was sent flying with a single shot. A gray shadow flew far away. Scylla was speechless. Was this proof? But soon, the gray cat ran over and spat the bullet out of its mouth. The bullet was intact and the medicine inside did not leak out. The most surprising thing was that Scylla had aimed at the cat's forehead and not its mouth when he fired. Right now, the cat's head was perfectly fine, and there was not a single change to it. The bullet, however, had come out of its mouth unscathed. Moreover, this kind of bullet was specially made to deal with large white bears. One shot could break their skin. He didn't expect this guy to be able to withstand it. How is it? Not bad, right? Huimao said proudly. You're not embarrassed to be shot away. It wouldn't have happened if I changed forms. Scylla put away the gun and asked curiously, "How did you change into these two forms?" "Even the elements change." A cyborg was a carbon-based life form when it was in biological form, and its elemental composition was no different from that of a normal living being. However, its elemental composition would change when it transformed into a mechanical form. Scylla had never seen a metal like this even though he had worked with Mo Hung for a long time. "I don't know. I was born with it. I can easily change element." It continued to be proud. "Let me see it turn into gold." "Don't you know what a directional change is?" Huimao looked like he was teaching. He stretched out his paw and drew a circle on the ground. "This is the elemental composition of my current form." He drew another circle. "This is the elemental composition of another form." Then he marked a two-way arrow between the two circles. "This is the so-called directional change." Scylla said disappointedly, "So you can't turn into gold." Huimao's ears pulled back. He was depressed. He suddenly felt that he was being looked down upon. "Forget it. Just make do. Follow me and slowly pay off your debt. At least you might encounter something similar to that white ball. You can perfect yourself, and you won't be sold to a research lab to be dissected by those crazy researchers." The gray cat was about to refute Scylla's earlier words, but it immediately quieted down when it heard Scylla's last sentence. Actually, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a few 100 million GL credits, and a couple of valuable alien beasts. Not long after, Huimao realized that he was too naive. Chapter 88. Scylla took out a stack of dark gold items from his bag and started to write. Huimao lay at the side and watched, its tail swaying here and there. It knew the common language of the League of Stars, and the dark gold stack clearly said receipt. That was why Huimao was very disdainful when Scylla took out this item. It wasn't going to deny it at all. "It's just a few 100 million, is there a need to act like this?" "What's your name?" Scylla asked. "There's no need to write Huimao on the receipt, is there?" "Hubeilu." "What?" "Hubeilu is the native language of this sector. It's the first language I came into contact with. Hubeilu means overlord. There were originally no humans on this planet, and the first humans to come here were from Sector T itself. That was why this was the first language Huimao learned. Later on, people from other sectors also came here, and in the end everyone used the common language of the League of Stars. Therefore, Huimao learned the common language later on. Scylla curled his lips when he heard this. "Overlord? What a cocky fart. I've only heard of tigers possessing the aura of a king, but I've never seen a cat with the air of a king. Here, it's done. Take a look and see if there's anything wrong with it. If there's nothing wrong with it, just sign your name, or a palm print." Scylla passed the written item to Huimao. Huimao glanced at the number Scylla wrote. It was 500 million, but it didn't think much of it. Without looking further, it raised its paw and pressed a palm print on the paper. All right. 2 copies, one for you and one for me. So that no one will go back on their word. Scylla passed one to Huimao, but Huimao ate it in one gulp. He stood up, stuck out his butt, stretched his back and shook his fur. Then Huimao said, "We can go now, right?" "Wait, there's something I need to tell you." Scylla put away the receipt and looked at Huimao seriously. "What?" Huimao asked lazily. "I am now a member of a hunter group. If you want to follow me, you will not be following me as a member of the hunter group, but as the debtor. In short, I am the creditor, and you are the slave." "Debt slave? It's so awful." The gray cat flicked its ears and said, "Then let's make it a pet. It'll help us conceal our identities." "Pet? I'm a dignified." "Then we'll be debt slaves." "I'll still be a pet. But let's make this clear. Once I pay off my debt, I won't be a pet or a debt slave anymore. Of course, you should be proud to have a pet like me. A dignified, in your words, a semi-mechanical life form is actually being treated as a pet. You have to know that I am." Blah blah blah. Hui Mao flaunted how special he was, how smart and how strong he was. Through this cat's incessant chatter, Serene knew that ever since the humans had built a stronghold on this planet, this cat had often wandered there. From there, it had learned the language of the Star Alliance, knew how to remember the year, could eavesdrop on the development plans of the humans on this planet, and could simulate the weapons of the humans. This cat was very proud of this. After all, it was self-taught, talented, intelligent, and had outstanding abilities. Sillin shook his head and ignored this guy who was immersed in self-improvement. He took out the hoverboard from his bag, unfolded it, activated it, and left. Hey, wait for me. Hui Mao kicked its legs and quickly hooked the back of the hoverboard with its claws. It jumped up and then lay on the hoverboard with its eyes wide open, looking at the ground, getting farther and farther away. Its round eyes were shining with excitement. When the time comes, don't casually say that you're a semi-mechanical life form, lest you cause too much trouble. Yes, I know. Hui Mao knew in its heart that the degree of perversion of humans was unimaginable. It was really not easy to find a reliable person, so it had not let humans discover it for so many years. By the time Sillin found Dias and the others, they were more or less done with their work. At that time, the communicator could not be used, and the white bears were all lying on the ground. Although Dias also felt uncomfortable, he knew that this was a rare opportunity, so it did not take much effort to deal with the white bears. Tang Qiuqiu was grabbing Ba Dao's uppermost arm and swinging it. Ba Dao freed 2 of his hands to deal with the animal hide, and the other 4 were for Tang Qiuqiu to play with. Seeing Sillin coming over, Tang Qiuqiu exerted strength in her arm and swung it in the air, doing a light somersault in the air and landing on the ground. Brother Sillin, you're really something. We've already finished the mission before you came over. Sillin laughed and fluttered Tang Qiuqiu's head, purposely messing up her short hair. Tang Qiuqiu did not get angry. She grabbed Sillin's fluttering hand and giggled. How many white bears did you catch? Sillin asked. A total of 7, and I killed one of them. No wonder she was so happy. When those white bears stood up, they were more than 7 meters tall. It was already very good to be able to kill one, let alone a child like Tang Qiuqiu. Not bad, impressive. Not far away, Yudi, Xiao Shang, and the others looked at Sillin in surprise. He had indeed changed his skin. They could not even recognize him. Even his physique had changed. He was more muscular and not as frail as before. Hui Mao was dissatisfied that he was ignored. He jumped down from the hoverboard and walked elegantly to the side to watch the people deal with the white bears. He had eaten countless of these white bears. It was no less than the number of white bears hunted by the hunters every time the planet opened up for hunting. He did not expect that their skin could be sold for money. He had to be more careful in the future. He had to divide the parts that could be sold for money and eat the rest of the meat. Hey, there's a cat. Brother Sillin, where did you get this cat? Tang Qiuqiu asked as she looked at Hui Mao, who was strolling leisurely in the field. I picked it up. Why did you pick up a cat? It's a kitten. With such a small size, it probably won't survive for long in the forest. You went for a walk just to pick up this kitten? Carrie said. Hearing Carrie's words, Hui Mao turned his head and looked at him with disdain. Yo, that guy actually looked down on me. That was a look of disdain, right? Carrie shouted as if he had discovered another Miantuan chameleon. It's true. Brother Sillin, what's its name? Tang Qiuqiu asked. Hubeilu or Holu for short. Hearing Sillin's words, Hui Mao, who was watching with interest as Carrie and Dias skinned the white bear, was rather displeased. However, seeing that he was the creditor, Hui Mao did not argue with him. It's really cute. Tang Qiuqiu laughed. What's cute about it? It's gray and ugly. Hearing Sillin's words, Hui Mao exploded again. You're the ugly one. You're ugly from head to toe. Carrie, who was skinning the bear, slipped and almost cut his hand. Oh my God, this guy can actually talk. Not bad, we can sell it for a good price. Not selling. not selling. Silen looked at Tang Qiuqiu. She was the one who said, not selling, at the same time as him. If we want to sell it, those white bears are enough. I'll keep it as a companion for the Miantuan. Tang Qiuqiu treasured Huimao quite a bit. Dias waved his hand. Alright, let's finish what we're doing first. The main ship is starting to rush us. After this batch of goods is done, we'll go do something big. Something big? Carrie's eyes lit up. Boss, are we going to do a 5-year mission? The sixth team had a rule. Every 5 years they would do something big. It could take half a year, or even 4 to 5 years. If it was a short time, the team members would have a long vacation. If it was a long time, they would not have any vacation at all. The so-called 5-year mission was to report the results to the Vanguard A team. If there were no results, the team's status in Vanguard would drop. On the other hand, if the results were good, the team's status would rise. Chapter 89. A 5-year mission was the standard to measure AB Squadron's overall strength and development. It could elevate AB Squadron into the limelight of the League of Stars in one go, but it could also make AB Squadron the target of scorn and ridicule. This was also Shotten's second 5-year mission after becoming the 6th Division's captain. His previous mission wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. Although he didn't become famous, he didn't tarnish his reputation either. At the very least, it proved his ability as the 6th Division's captain. A 5-year mission was difficult, that was for sure. They might encounter an unprecedented crisis, and no one could guarantee that they would survive a 5-year mission unscathed, not even the captain or the second in command. Losing a group of people, but at the same time training a group of people. The hunter group had grown through such repeated training. Hunters were used to wandering on the edge of life and death all year round. It was precisely because they were used to this kind of excitement and a life of adventure that when they heard that there was a dangerous mission, they didn't show any anxiety or panic. Instead, they showed unbearable excitement, especially the veteran hunters. After receiving Dias's affirmation, Callie and the others cheered. They didn't have much experience in the previous 5-year mission, and they hadn't enjoyed following behind their seniors. This time, they would enjoy it to the fullest. Thinking of this, Carrie and the others sped up their work. Silen joined in as well. Tang Qiuqiu and Huimao squatted beside Silen and watched as they dealt with the spoils of war. Seeing that Huimao wasn't even blinking, Tang Qiuqiu asked, "Are you interested in this, Wheeze?" "Call me Hubeilu." Huimao was very dissatisfied. "But Wheeze sounds friendly." "Friendly?" Huimao was instantly elated. He no longer cared about how Tang Qiuqiu addressed him. However, he didn't mention that he owed money either. Calling him a debt slave was too embarrassing. After dealing with the white bear, everyone returned to the temporary base. After tidying up, they boarded the spaceplane and returned to the starship docked at the spaceport. Huimao walked back and forth on the starship with his tail raised, as if he was patrolling his territory. Behind Huimao, the Miantuan eagerly followed. It was not easy to find a fellow on the ship who was not a human like himself. The Miantuan was still very excited. At least he would have someone to share his fate with if he caused trouble in the future. Although the 5-year mission had yet to begin, the people on the starship were not idle. They checked the food storage, energy storage, weapons, and equipment. They also had to carefully inspect the starship. All the old parts had to be replaced. Since they were going to do something big, they could not afford to make any mistake. Details determined success or failure. Silen and the engineering team member on the starship were inspecting the starship together. The person in charge of engineering on the starship, Enji, was also an octopus. Unlike Ba Dao, who was robust, Enji was on the skinnier side. Although an octopus was tall, in terms of weight, Enji might not be able to match up to Silen. There were many people like Enji. They would not rush to the front lines of battle but were part of the logistics team. Of course, the technicians who could stay in a hunter regiment were not ordinary people. At the very least, they would not be lacking in courage. Whenever there was a need, they would pick up a gun and go to the battlefield. During the maintenance, Enji and Silen exchanged their insights. Enji really admired Silen as a young man. Although he was young, he was truly talented and knowledgeable. He was able to see through the key points of some machinery's structure with just a glance, and Silen was also able to listen to opinions and suggestions humbly. It was pretty good for someone his age. Enji's 6 arms were busy. Some were holding tools, some were holding parts, and some were holding instruments. Silen was recording at the side. Alright, this area is done. Let's take a break before we proceed to the next area for inspection. Taking the water from Silen, Enji gulped down 2 mouthfuls. He caught his breath and looked at Silen's recording. Not bad. Very professional recording. Enji was not stingy with his praise. He unfolded a chair and sat down, placing the tools into the toolbox one by one. Brother Enji, what's that? Silen pointed at Enji's tool and a small piece of reddish-brown crystal inside. Oh, this. Enji smiled. He picked up the small piece and handed it to Silen. Look carefully. Can you guess what it is? Silen took the small piece of crystal. This small piece was only half the size of a thumb. Resin. Silen could distinguish the main components of this thing. At the same time, he saw a creature buried in the bread. It was less than a centimeter long, and its body was semicircular. It had many pairs of legs and a pair of chelicerae. It looked somewhat ferocious. I've never seen this kind of creature. There are many kinds of creatures in the universe. It's normal not to have seen one. Enji smiled. Can you guess where the worm inside came from? Silen shook his head. Although many creatures could be speculated about their living environment based on their body shape, more creatures could not be imagined. Silen's intuition told him that the creature buried inside was not simple. Enji chuckled. He took the reddish-brown small piece, rubbed the surface with his fingers, and sighed. This is a parasite. Parasite? Silen knew that Enji was not talking about human parasites, but parasites that lived on starships and spaceships that traveled in the universe. Yes, this is also something we have to pay special attention to every time we repair the starship. We also have to check it from time to time during long-distance flights. Once we find a parasite, we have to eliminate it in time. Otherwise, there will be endless problems in the future. Just a little bit like this can destroy a huge starship. They can withstand cosmic rays, withstand the vacuum environment, and are firmly nailed to spaceship. Many of the substances they secrete can corrode spaceship. Although it is not visible for a while, it will be troublesome after a long time. When it is really discovered, it will be too late. Do you know what will happen if a hole suddenly appears on a starship when it is flying in the universe and there is no time to repair it? Silen trembled unconsciously. How terrifying! They will also damage some key parts of the starship, whether it is the weapon system, the energy transmission tubes, or some interfaces. They may become their habitat. There are many kinds of parasites in the universe, and their preferences are different. Some like places with active energy and some like places with oxygen. In short, what we need to do is to check the starship regularly to prevent future problems. Enji flicked the small piece in his hand and caught it again. Every time we do this, we will prepare an embedding fluid. Small parasites like this can be buried in the embedding fluid, just like amber. After the mission is over, we can sell it at a high price to researchers or collectors. Many people like to collect this kind of cosmic parasite. To a certain extent, these cosmic parasites are also very rare. The one in my hand was obtained during the last 5-year mission. This is just one of them. I kept one for myself and did not sell it. It is a souvenir. If you are interested, when we find parasites, we will call you over to take a look when we remove them. That's good. Thank you, Brother Enji. Kid, why are you so polite? Let's go to the next place for maintenance. After following Enji for maintenance, Silen was ready to go back to the lounge to lie down, but he had only taken a few steps when he heard Carrie's roar. "Sillen, look at what your cat has done." Chapter 90. Carrie looked at the storage cupboard in his room, his face livid with anger. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at the almost empty storage cupboard. He said to Sillen, who had just walked over, and Yudi, who was wearing strawberry-patterned pajamas and plush slippers, "Sleepy, you guys have to be responsible for the evil that your pets have done." Sillen glanced at the storage cupboard. It was really clean. No wonder Carrie was so angry. Yudi yawned and said without the slightest sense of guilt, "I told you to remember to lock the food cupboard. Who can you blame if it's stolen? How was that reasonable?" Carrie was so angry that his eyebrows were almost raised. "I locked it." "What about the door?" The door was not locked. Seeing Carrie's constipated look, he knew that he must have forgotten to lock the door again. Yudi said lazily, "How many times has it been? I can only say that you are stupid and have no sense of worry." You. Carrie wanted to pick up a hammer and smash it. "How many times has that bastard chameleon eaten secretly? How dare you say that? That chameleon of yours is as smart as a ghost. It actually knows how to hide its toenails and uses a decoder." Carrie was annoyed at the thought of this. "And you, Sillen, listen." Carrie pressed the communicator in his hand. It played a recording. This was installed by Carrie on the lock. As soon as the cupboard was unlocked, it would automatically start recording. After a series of rustling sounds, 2 different rhythms of chewing food could be heard. Yudi's mientuan had a specific chewing frequency. Carrie was quite familiar with this. He could even hear the sound of that bastard chameleon sucking food with its tongue. It had to be said that the mientuan was indeed a freak among the chameleons. It had a wide range of diet. Could eat vegetables, eat meat, drink wine, and drink fruit juice. This was not AF** King Chameleon, but a demon from somewhere. No wonder when Sillen first set foot on this starship, when Dias mentioned the mientuan, the first thing he asked was, what did he do wrong? He recognized the sound of the mientuan eating, and the other sound should be that of the huimao. Meow. This satisfied Meow after eating and drinking made the veins on Carrie's forehead bulge. Carrie's heart was bleeding. His compressed biscuits, jerky, and fruit pies. Hearing this voice, Sillen's eyes twitched. "Meow my ass. You can do bad things, but don't let people know. Are you afraid that people won't know that you're the only cat on the starship?" "Sigh, that's enough." Sillen patted Carrie's shoulder. "When we meet up with the captain, we'll stock up some food. I promise that your cabinet will be filled to the brim. As for that cat, you can treat it as a greeting gift. Maybe when you're in danger, the cat will repay you for saving your life." That kitten that hasn't fully grown yet? Don't judge a cat by its appearance. That little guy is very powerful." Carrie was silent for a while, then waved his hand. "Get out of here, you two. I'm going to change the lock. Yudi, tell your mientuan to hide well. Don't let me catch you." In the past, Carrie used to use fingerprint identification. Later, after the bastard chameleon stole his fingerprint, Carrie reflected on it. It was just a fingerprint. Where couldn't he get it on the starship? The guy that had been with Yudi and Beaver for so long was used to this kind of thing. Therefore, Carrie changed the locks one by one to prevent the gluttonous chameleon. Somewhere on the starship, Huimao licked his paws and wiped his face. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lip. He looked at the mientuan. "Are there any food scraps?" The mientuan shook his head. "That's good. Hee, it's not bad to have a change of taste." Huimao was very satisfied. The mientuan grinned. Finally, he had a companion to eat with him. The mientuan nestled in Yudi's room. It was a lush small tree that was only half the height of a person. However, it was full of leaves. The mientuan liked to sleep on it. After eating, he would sleep. This was the instinct of an animal. However, the mientuan's steps were a little hesitant. After all, he had done something bad again. When he arrived at the door of Yudi's room, he raised his forelimbs and pressed a button. A hole appeared. The mientuan stuck his tongue inside. After scanning his tongue, a small door opened with a beep. He climbed in. His forelimbs landed on the ground. When he looked up, he saw Yudi waiting for him. Hurry up and get in here. Close the door. I have something to ask you. Yudi's voice sounded calm. The Miantuan moved in slowly. After the small door was closed, he still leaned against the wall. His eyes darted around, but he didn't look at Yudi. You were caught by Carrie again for stealing food today. The Miantuan's body stiffened and he lowered his head. When you open the lock, remember to check if there's anything else installed on the lock. After a pause, Yudi said, You didn't open the lock on Carrie's cabinet, did you? I remember Carrie changed the lock with multi-dimensional encryption. I haven't taught you how to open that kind of lock. The Miantuan nodded. How did he open it? Yudi took out an electronic drawing board. The Miantuan walked over and started to draw on it with his limbs. It was hard to imagine a dragon could use its limbs so flexibly. Looking at the drawing on the drawing board, Yudi's eyes flashed and he smiled. Get along well with that cat in the future. It'll benefit you greatly. The Miantuan nodded. All right, get out and find a place to sleep. You're not allowed to sleep in the nest today. Carrie told you to hide well. Don't let him catch you. Yudi put away the drawing board and stopped looking at the Miantuan. He lay on the bed and continued to catch up on his sleep. He didn't sleep well today before he was woken up by Carrie. The Miantuan looked pitifully at his little green nest and crawled out of the room through the little door. I'll have to find a place to sleep again today. Forget it. I'll go find that cat. At least I'll have a companion to share the punishment with when Carrie catches me. Huimao didn't fare much better either. He was taught a lesson by Silen, and he even owed him a favor. However, the guy only felt depressed for a moment before he curled his body into a circle and slept soundly. The sixth team's target this time was Sector Z. It was one of the 3 most dangerous and undeveloped sectors in the League of Stars. There were very few official star maps of Sector Z. Almost only the outermost zone was shown. Sector Z was a dark triangle on the overall star map of the League of Stars. Darkness meant that it was undeveloped, and because it was triangular, it was called the Dark Triangle. Of course, this was only public information. If a hunter regiment had explored it themselves, the star maps recorded would either be sold at a high price or kept for their own use. Normally, they wouldn't make them public unless there was something special. If a hunter regiment could discover a habitable planet, then it would be a matter of both fame and fortune for a hunter regiment. The League of Stars had made relevant policies since a long time ago. If a habitable planet was discovered in an undeveloped area, they would allocate a large amount of bounty to the hunter regiment who discovered it. At the same time, they would also report it on high-contribution magazines. It was enough to increase the hunter regiment's fame, and some would even allow the hunter regiment to name their own planet. The reason the 4 great hunter regiments were so famous was because they appeared so frequently in magazines that they outshone the other hunter regiments. Shotton's choice of Sector Z was also made after careful consideration and a show of hands by the 6 lieutenant commanders. If they wanted to increase their influence now, they had to produce results. Other than the discovery of habitable planets, the places that truly contained great treasures were the undeveloped areas. Danger and opportunity coexisted. Chapter 91. By the time Silen and the others had arrived at the rendezvous point Shotton had mentioned, the other 5 squads had already returned to their respective squads. After they had merged their starships with the 6th squad's main starship, they reported their hunted goods and traded them to the buyers they had already contacted. However, Silen didn't need to do anything about it. Right now, he was sitting in his room reading a book. It was a book about space parasites he borrowed from Engie. There were a lot of things that couldn't be found on the Federation's major online platforms, and normal electronic publications wouldn't record too much about them. Some of the truly useful things required permission to read. Silen's current identity as a hunter couldn't read some official documents. Hunters usually kept their belongings to their own people, and wouldn't easily make them public. The book in Silen's hands belonged to Vanguard, and it wasn't announced to the public. This book was more like a notebook. It was something that the person who wrote it down. Although it wasn't the original, at least all the notes were copied exactly the same. Silen could see the mood of the person who wrote it at the time from the handwriting. The person who wrote this notebook was called Communidin, but Engie only said that it was left behind by a deceased senior. He didn't explain too much about Communidin, but Silen could roughly guess the person's identity from the content. From some of the things recorded in the notebook, Silen knew that Communidin was a member of the 3rd B Squadron. He was probably an engineer on a starship like Engie, but his position was higher than Engie's. This was because Communidin had mentioned the 3rd B Squadron's commander Nada more than once, and it seemed like he had a good relationship with Nada. The problem was that the current commander of the 3rd B Squadron wasn't called Nada, but Falvi. That being said, 47 years was enough for the masses of humanity to welcome a new generation. Judging from the ephemeris recorded in the notebook, this notebook had been around for a while. The last record was 47 years ago, and there were no other records after that. There were a lot of pictures in the notebook, and they were all of the parasites Communidin encountered when he was in the 3rd B Squadron. There were also annotations and explanations at the bottom of the pictures, stating the habits and hobbies of the parasites shown in the pictures. As Silen was reading, the doorbell rang. It was Carrie, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Although he was waiting outside, Carrie's face was full of excitement. "What? Did you win the prize? You look so happy." Silen closed the book and said to Carrie, who came in, "Hee, I have something to show you." Carrie took out his laptop and brought up a 3D projection. "Look, new equipment. Do you feel domineering? This time, the captain is really going all out," Carrie said excitedly as he switched images. Just looking at the image alone was enough to shock Silen. There was a wide variety of weapons in this batch, ranging from cold equipment to firearms. Although he didn't recognize many of the strange weapons, he knew that they were expensive just from the plasma guns and shoulder cannons. Carrie pointed at one of the wrist blades and asked sneakily, "Do you know how much this wrist blade costs?" "What material?" "I don't know, but I asked the lieutenant before, and this is how much it costs." Carrie held up 5 fingers. 50,000? 500,000. Truly shocking. Silen had always thought that he was a little rich, but now he was dealt a blow. "It really is a money-burning job." Seeing Silen's expression, Carrie said, "You can't be thinking that those lousy guns you used to kill white bears are enough for a 5-year mission, can you? Exploration in the universe is a money-burning job. If your equipment is not good, no matter how many lives you have, it won't be enough. In the last 5-year mission, I remember that when I went to kill a strange creature, it crushed my high-strength alloy knife like it was mud. I almost lost my life." Carrie dragged a chair over and sat down. "Before I became a hunter, I was very naive about everything. Only after I became one did I realize how stupid I was. Luck doesn't come to me all the time, and benefits don't come to me all the time. In the captain's words, we have to be pragmatic. Confidence needs the accumulation of capital. So basically, the trivial missions that we usually do are prepared for the 5-year mission." Silen agreed with Carrie's words. A few $100 million might seem like a lot, but in reality, if it was really used on high-level missions, it would burn through very quickly. Just like the results published in Glory and Code, they were obtained by stepping on the corpses of countless people and test subjects, and burning through countless amounts of money. Otherwise, how could it be so easy to have such illustrious achievements that would affect the entire League of Stars? Even Ori, the one who created the strange chip, must have sacrificed a lot of people's lives even if he didn't necessarily spend a lot of money on it. Silen still remembered the failed experimental subjects who were preserved in liquid-like specimens in Ori's laboratory. Looking into Silen's room, Carrie asked, "Where's that bastard cat of yours?" "He went to patrol the territory." That guy had to patrol this starship every day, clearly dividing it into his own territory. The Miantuan also joined in the fun. However, Silin did not allow Huimao to step into other starships. He was only allowed to move around in the small team's starship. By the way, Carrie, do you know Komunidin? Komunidin? Carrie frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head. Never heard of him. What about Nada? Nada. I think I've heard of him. Oh, he's the father of Falvi, the captain of Team 3. Nada was the previous captain of Team 3, but more than 40 years ago. At this point, Carrie paused and scratched his head. Silin, some things are hard to say. Silin waved his hand. It's okay, I'm just curious. This notebook was written by Komunidin, and Komunidin used to be a member of Team 3. However, Brother Enji said that Senior Komunidin had passed away many years ago. The last record in this notebook was from 47 years ago. 47 years ago. That year, many glorious people fell. Sigh, I've only heard a few words. If the captain doesn't talk about these things, it's better for us not to talk about it. You know, the incident that year involved many people. It's too complicated. The 4 major hunter regiments, the military, and even some political figures were involved. Yes, I understand. Although he said this, Silin was actually very curious about the incident that happened 47 years ago. After all, he had never heard anything about it until now. However, what Silin thought was one thing, but he could not show it on his face. Alright, I'm here to talk to you about the new goods. As frontline combatants, we have the right to choose first, but our choices are limited. Think about what you want to choose first, and I'll send you the information. The lieutenant and the others are probably coming back from a meeting soon. When they return, we'll depart for Sector Z. We must do a good job this time. Not long after Carrie left, Diaz returned from a meeting and notified the members of the squad to go over and instruct them on the relevant matters. Then, the staff members returned to their positions. Although they were connected to the A Squadron's large starship and did not need to do much, they still had to pay attention to some details. They had to be prepared to deal with unexpected events at all times. Amidst the music, the giant starship marked with the Vanguard emblem left Sector T and headed towards their destination, Sector Z of the Dark Triangle. Chapter 92. Although Sector Z was called the Dark Triangle, it didn't mean that it was actually a sea of darkness. It was just that it was an undeveloped area, and that was why it was black on the League of Stars star map. Carrie looked at the exterior scene displayed on the screen and muttered, "This really doesn't look like the Dark Triangle." The scenery outside the starship was similar to the other sectors. The stars were bright, but it was known that the creatures in this area were very dangerous, and magnetic anomalies were common. There was a team made up of specialized personnel on the main ship that was responsible for scanning and probing. According to the old rules, they had to probe at least 10 planets every time they arrived at an undeveloped area, or it would be a disgrace to Vanguard. The periphery of Sector Z had been explored before, and some of them were done by Vanguard. However, no matter which hunter regiment it was, they would only explore a certain number of planets each time. They would not explore too many planets at once, and it was fine as long as they could do it. Exploration was not the same as suicide, at least they had to know their limit. After looking at the general star map, Schotten chose a flight route. This route extended slightly towards the center of Sector Z at a certain angle, but not too far. He would proceed step by step. The partial results of the exploration team's analysis would be transmitted to the 6 squadrons on the main ship at the same time. Looking at the data displayed on the screen, Carrie sighed. They had explored 3 planets since they came to Sector Z. One planet's habitability was rank C, and the other 2 were rank D. Habitability was the degree to which a planet was suitable for human habitation. It was usually divided into 4 levels: A, B, C, and D. A planet meant that the planet was very suitable for human habitation. If they discovered a planet like this, the 6th team would become famous, and they would receive a huge fortune. If it was B class, then it was just SOSO. Although the conditions were not very good, they could still make do with it. It should be noted that many planets with rank B habitability were not very suitable for human habitation, but they were suitable for other life forms. Therefore, many large families would buy these planets for special breeding purposes. Rank C meant that the planet was not suitable for human habitation. The environmental conditions there prevented humans from staying in their natural state for long periods of time. Rank D meant that the planet was extremely unsuitable for human habitation. It was not a matter of time before humans could survive in their natural state. If the habitability level was D, they only needed to send out probes to search, take samples, and record various parameters, coordinates, and so on. However, these were the work of the technical staff and had nothing to do with Carrie. However, if it was a grade C planet, then it would not just be a matter of the probes. They would also need to send a small team to search the planet, retrieve living creatures, and list out the evolution of the creatures on the planet. When Carrie heard that one of them was a C-grade planet, he stood up and prepared to pick up his weapon. However, Schotten arranged for another team to go down. Although they didn't find much, and the evolution level of the creatures on the planet was relatively low, there wasn't even a single high-grade plant. However, Carrie felt that it was too idle, and it was fine to go out for a walk. Bored, he glanced at the Mientuan that was rolling around with Huimao not far away. Carrie chuckled and grabbed the Mientuan's tail before it could sense the danger and escape. He rolled it into a ball. Carrie threw the Mientuan like a pinball against the wall. He caught it after it bounced back, threw it again, and caught it again. Seeing this, Huimao's pair of cat eyes widened, and its pupils dilated. Its head swayed along the Mientuan's trajectory, and before the Mientuan hit the wall, it jumped up with a whoosh. Smack. Not bad. Other than eating and sleeping, it seems that you still have some uses. As he spoke, Carrie threw the Mientuan that had been smacked back to another angle, and it was smacked back again. He changed the angle again, and it was smacked back again, and again, and again. The man and the cat were having a lot of fun playing there. All teams, attention. A grade B planet has been discovered. All teams, get ready. Smack. The Mientuan was smacked against the wall. Carrie and Huimao were attracted by the news, and no one smacked it again. Everyone gathered in front of the screen closest to them, which displayed the results sent by the detection and analysis team. Low atmospheric pressure and oxygen partial pressure, strong radiation. Sigh, it's actually not that bad. It's fine even without the protective suit, Carrie said excitedly as he stared at the screen. A grade B planet was not that easy to discover. A grade C planet was enough to make Carrie excited for a long time, let alone a grade B planet. Most of the time, a small team would be enough for a grade C planet, but for a grade B planet, everyone would basically be sent out. Through the pictures, analysis data, and various parameters sent back by the detector, everyone started to make preparations. Each of the 6 teams had to send out a team in advance. When Tang Qiuqiu saw that Silan, Xiao Shang, Ba Dao, and Carrie were all in the advance team, she wanted to go with them, but Dias rejected her and asked her to go with the second team. A grade B planet meant that there were a lot of advanced creatures. No matter what level they evolved to, whether they were similar to humans, and no matter what level their civilization had developed to, they could not be underestimated. Even plants could eat humans sometimes. After all, Tang Qiuqiu was still young. In terms of adventure experience, she definitely could not compare to the others. Therefore, for the sake of safety, Dias rejected Tang Qiuqiu's proposal to join the advance team. Seeing that Carrie and the others had left, the Mientuan slowly crawled to Yudi's feet with a heavily injured look. It hugged Yudi's trouser leg, looking very aggrieved. It wanted to complain that it had been mistreated. Yudi calmly took a sip of tea. Today, we can go and loot Carrie's cabinet. The previously dispirited Mientuan trembled when it heard that. It quickly perked up as if it had been injected with chicken blood. It turned around and ran toward Carrie's room. It crawled very quickly and did not seem to be injured at all. On the other side, Hui Mao naturally followed Silin and the others into the aircraft. Seeing that, Carrie nudged Hui Mao with the barrel of his gun. "What are you going to do?" Hui Mao said with anticipation. "I'm going to look for food, of course." Carrie choked and said to Silin, "Silin, aren't you afraid that something will happen to this little one?" Silin glanced at Hui Mao, who was squatting by his feet and shaking its head rhythmically. "It might not be worse than you." "Yes, I'm definitely not worse than you," Hui Mao said. "Right my ass. Don't think that I won't know the contempt in your words, just because you changed the order of your words." Carrie knocked Hui Mao's head with the barrel of his gun. "I heard that cats and tigers share the same ancestor. We're about to go to war. Let's give a loud and domineering roar to boost the morale." Originally, Carrie wanted to give this gluttonous and sleepy cat a blow, but he did not expect Hui Mao to really open its mouth. "Be careful, we're on the aircraft," Silin reminded him. Hui Mao's mouth was wide open. It paused for a moment and adjusted itself. "Take a deep breath. Roar." The communication devices of the 6 spacecrafts that were part of the vanguard of the 6 squads were switched on, and the main ship was also connected. Therefore, the sudden roar that sounded like a prehistoric behemoth directly shocked everyone. The aircraft that Silin and the others were on also made an S-shaped trajectory. The pilot of the aircraft was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Roar of a beast? Where did the beast come from? Was it a purposely played sound effect? "Diaz, what's going on?" On the main ship, Shotten shouted into the communication device. "Ahem, this is a roar made by one of our members to boost morale." Diaz wiped his sweat. He looked at Carrie, who was a little dazed, and Hui Mao, who was licking its paws as if nothing had happened after the roar. He sighed in his heart. "No wonder it's our team's cat." The 6 aircraft flew out of the starship and headed toward the green planet in front of them from 6 different directions. After scanning the terrain and confirming the landing point, they landed. The defense system was activated, and the Sentinels were released. The Sentinels were distributed around the aircraft in a regular pattern. After confirming that it was safe, the cabin door opened. The first to come out was not Diaz, the deputy captain, but Hui Mao. Hui Mao couldn't wait to jump out. Its nose twitched and it took a deep breath. It let out a long sigh. "The smell of food." Then it ran away. "Don't worry about it. Let's do our job," Silin said. Diaz nodded. Previously, when they were on the starship, they had already distributed the work, so there was no need to give more instructions now. "Let's go." Everyone was wearing protective clothing and masks. In addition to blocking radiation, resisting pressure, and maintaining a constant body temperature, the protective clothing was mainly used to prevent contact with poisonous plants, unknown planets, and unknown species, so it was best to be careful. The protective clothing was equipped with weapons. Everyone's equipment was different, so they chose their equipment according to what they were familiar with. There was a scanner attached to the mask, and it had settings such as zoom, filtering, and locking. It provided a variety of vision while also locking on to the target. This kind of equipment did indeed cost a lot of money. It also proved what Carrie said. This was a job that burned money. Chapter 93. Although the detectors and the 6 squads that were scattered around did not find anything related to the mechanical civilization, everyone was still fully armed. Sometimes, native animals and plants were more difficult to deal with than machines. Silin's party was led by Diaz as they walked through the jungle. The reason why this planet looked green was because there were many jungles. The trees were many and dense, and many species had never been seen before. The collection and analysis of the plant species was done by the detectors, and Silin's party would collect the information of the animals according to the situation. One had to know that even if it was just information, as long as the species was special and had never been discovered by humans, information about them would be worth a lot of money. The results of the sensors would be displayed on the mask, and the humidity, temperature, and pressure of the surrounding air would also be displayed. There were birds flying over the forest, and they were very fast. Through the instantaneous capture and analysis of the images, they could tell that these birds were similar to eagles, but they were slightly different. Moreover, their cries were sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes sharp and sometimes low, and sometimes long and short. Stepping on the thick leaves on the ground, the group walked carefully. Serene loosened the mask and took a breath of the surrounding air, distinguishing the mixed smell in the air. The main tree species in the forest was a large tree that had never been seen before. Dias chopped down a large tree that was growing relatively well. The tree was very hard, and it would be very suitable for some manufacturing. The horizontal cut of the trunk showed its growth rings. They were very dense, and there was not much space between each ring. Dias sent the image of this cross-section of the tree rings to the spaceship, and the people on the spaceship sent the information to the starship outside the planet. There would be specialized personnel to collect and analyze the information. "Yo, the flowers on that tree are quite beautiful," someone said. There was a tree not far away. It was not too tall, but it was very thick. The center was about 5 meters tall, and the diameter of the trunk was about 1 meter. There were many branches, distributed on both sides like open wings. The leaves were very thick, and there were some dark brown dots on the trunk, arranged vertically on the trunk. What was strange was that there were some vine-like things on the trunk. One end of the vine was connected to the trunk, and the other end was filled with beautiful red and white flowers. The red and white petals seemed to be arranged by a thin layer of scales. The scattered light from the leaves above shone on the flower and was reflected by the scales. It was like the bright starlight in the universe. Just looking at it gave people the urge to reach out and pick it up. Serene sniffed the air. There was a slight licky smell in the air, like a temptation. If it was an ordinary person without a mask, they would definitely not be able to resist this temptation and walk forward. Although the flowers were beautiful, no one walked up to them. Although the flowers gave people a breathtaking feeling at first glance, based on experience, the more beautiful the flowers were, the more murderous they were. Carrie chopped off another section of the tree that Dias had cut down and threw it at the tree. Almost at the moment when this section of the trunk touched a flower, the surrounding branches that spread out like wings closed at lightning speed, imprisoning the prey. At the same time, with a whooshing sound, Serene and the others saw a row of sharp thorns piercing through the trunk. Those sharp thorns were the dark brown dots that they saw on the trunk earlier. And from this series of reactions, it could be seen that this arrangement was simply a natural trap. The group of people shivered. The trunk was very hard, but those sharp thorns easily pierced through it like tofu. It could be seen that the hardness was extraordinary. Dias waved his hand and the group continued to walk forward. The more they walked, the stranger they felt. Other than a small number of lethal plants, this forest was actually considered safe, and there were not many poisonous plants. However, other than some small insects, it was too quiet. This kind of silence was not in terms of sound. After all, there was the occasional sound of insects flapping their wings and birds flying in the sky from time to time, but their figures were blocked by the increasingly dense branches. This kind of silence meant that after walking in this forest for so long, they did not see a slightly larger animal. Rabbits, monkeys, wild boars, mice, and what not. Based on past experience, the group also looked for some places that might have animal caves, but still did not find any. There were no animals in such a good environment? That was impossible. Some of the images taken by the probes in space around the planet had seen a few large and ferocious animals. It could be said that although this planet did not develop a mechanical civilization, the species' evolution had also evolved to a relatively high level. Dias was puzzled, and he had an inexplicable sense of crisis. He had always trusted his intuition, and his intuition told him that this situation was very bad. They were now deep in the forest, and the deeper they went, the more they felt that there was a big mouth waiting for them. While the group was thinking, the sensors sounded an alarm. Through the scanning area displayed on the masks, the group discovered that some things were coming towards them. There were more than 30 of them, which was 3 times the number of people they had, and they were moving very fast. Without needing Dias to say anything, the group formed a formation, and the weapons in their hands were ready. As they got closer, even without the face scanner, they could hear the sound of those things running and the low growls they made. Bang 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 bang! Before those things completely came into sight, the group opened fire. If they waited until they really saw them before firing, it would be too late. Everyone was an experienced hunter. Even new members like Silen, Ba Dao, and Xiao Shang had a lot of experience, so they did not panic at all in this situation. Their hands holding the guns were steady and their aim was good. With the positioning signal on the masks, although it was not 100%, it was definitely 99% accurate. The display of the heat signal also allowed them to seize the opportunity to shoot those things when they were not blocked by thick trees. After so many years of experience, they tried to minimize the wastage of ammunition. However, this time they had no choice. After shooting those things, they didn't die. Although there was a moment of pause, they were still full of momentum. It seemed like they wouldn't give up until their last breath. Dias calculated that it would take about 5 bullets to kill one of them. He was sure that he had hit the heads of those things every time, but they did not die. They would only stop after the 4th or 5th bullet. Perhaps they were dead, but Dias was not sure. Based on the speed of those things, the gap of 4 or 5 bullets was enough for them to get closer. Moreover, there were only 12 people on their side. Not everyone could kill 3 of those things before they reached them. Silen had already killed 2 of them. His firing rate was very fast, so fast that the others suspected that he was wasting ammunition. In fact, according to Silen's heat signal, as long as those things were not blocked by trees, even if it was only for a moment, Silen would shoot them. He even calculated the speed of the bullets and the running speed of the things, so it was almost accurate. Moreover, Silen had locked onto 3 of them at the same time. When the others killed one, he was already on the 3rd. Finally, the first one jumped out of the bushes. Silen and Xiao Shang shot it almost at the same time. Probably because it had been shot before, it was shot twice more before it fell to the ground. Dias did not have the time to take a closer look at these things. With just a quick glance, he knew why these guys were so resistant. Chapter 94. That thing looked very strange. Its head was simply too small compared to its entire body, and a thick layer of hardened keratin almost covered its entire head. At the back of its head, the keratin layer and bony plates extended backward, covering 1/3 of its torso. It was spread out at a certain angle so that it could easily block all the attacks from the front. The parts that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer looked extremely thick. Although the 2/3 of its torso did not have thick keratin armor, there were many protruding thorns, making it look even more ferocious. Their legs were thick and short, and the soles of their feet were shaped like hooves. Overall, they looked very cumbersome, but no one would have thought that such a seemingly cumbersome fellow could run so fast. This thing was very well armed. Some people had once said that small animals had low intelligence. In order to survive, they would evolve their bodies into a strict defensive state, making up for their lack of intelligence with the defense of their bodies. Silen did not know if these things had high intelligence, but even if they were not, they were definitely not idiot. When they attacked, they aimed their heads at the enemy and attacked in a straight line. They tried not to expose the parts of their torso that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer. Although it was only a short glance, everyone had their thoughts. After all, they were veterans, so there was no need to say much. They adjusted their angles and continued to shoot. This time, the focus was on their legs. If they were accurate, 1 bullet would be able to make them lose their ability to move. In fact, it was not a bad idea to shoot their limbs, but the bushes and some dense grass in the forest covered their thick and short limbs very well. Even the heat sensor might not be able to accurately sense them all the time. Fortunately, there were only about 30 of them. If there were more, they would have to fight in close combat. When they finally got rid of these guys, everyone let out a temporary sigh of relief. However, they did not dare to relax too much. Temporary peace did not mean temporary safety. A few people walked over and shot the ones that were still breathing. Diaz walked towards the closest one. This one was the closest to them, so it was also the one that suffered the most. Looking at the thick keratin covering that thing's head, Diaz fired a shot. Seeing the effect of this shot, everyone was speechless. Based on the gun in his hand, a single shot was enough to leave a huge hole in the chest of those polar bears, but when it hit this thing, it only took off a piece of its skin. If he shot the same spot a second time, he would be able to penetrate the skin, but he didn't know how deep it would go and how much damage it would cause. After all, when it was alive and in a state of attack, the tension of its muscles was different. Perhaps it had some life-saving skills. If there's another wave of these things, we might have to use armor-piercing bullets, someone sighed. Micro-armor-piercing bullets were not used to deal with armored vehicles or some armed aircraft. Instead, they were specifically used to deal with creatures covered in armor, including humans and some other creatures. However, everyone had a limited number of armor-piercing bullets, so they hadn't used them before. I really didn't think that there would be such well-armed creatures on this planet. That hardened stratum corneum and bony plates are way too hard. If these things were as dense as rats. Carrie didn't finish his sentence, but everyone shuddered at the thought. How terrifying! As Carrie spoke, the detector sounded an alarm again. This time, it sounded very urgent. This alarm meant that a foreign life form was approaching. It was the same as the previous alarm, but the previous alarm didn't sound this urgent. What's going on? Someone said. Everyone entered a state of high alert. But not long after, black bugs the size of a fist burrowed out of the ground. These bugs crawled out of the places where the dead creatures were lying. The black bugs burrowed into the wounds of the horny creatures. Not long after, a large number of black bugs wrapped around the creatures, and then the pile of creatures shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. When these bugs finished eating and burrowed back into the ground, all that was left was a layer of stratum corneum and bone. These were the forest cleaners. As long as any animal died, they would burrow out of the ground and eat the dead animal. Then, they would return to the ground and hibernate, waiting for the next feast. Carrie let out a long sigh of relief. That scared me. As soon as he said that, the alarm sounded again. This time, it wasn't urgent, but that didn't mean it would be easy. F***ck. There's no end to it, Carrie said angrily. Sillin frowned. He had just heard the sound of a bird. Although it wasn't loud, probably from a distance, and it was short, it was definitely the kind of bird he had seen before. It's a snake. Damn, these snakes can change color. Through the scanning, the mask revealed the true appearance of the newcomers. It was difficult to accurately spot these snakes with the naked eye. Snakes were temperature-changing creatures, different from the heat signals released by the horny creatures. But the scanning device still displayed them perfectly on the mask, so everyone could know the specific location of these snakes. F***ck, why are there so many snakes? I didn't see a single one before. Why did so many suddenly appear? That's right, why? Everyone was puzzled. But while they were puzzled, they still had to deal with it. Since it was just snakes, there was no need to retreat. Don't use the flamethrower. Use ultra-low temperature condensation, Diaz said. Got it. Everyone took out a tube-shaped object. When the snakes came within 15 meters of them, they pressed the button on the tube, and white mist sprayed out. When the snakes came into contact with the white mist, they instantly hardened and froze. If the snakes behind wanted to come over, they could only go around the frozen snakes in front. Because even if they hadn't come into contact with the frozen snakes, the previously active snakes couldn't take it anymore. The temperature was too low. With the ultra-low temperature condensation, It didn't take much effort for the group to freeze the snake. After the snakes were frozen, they smashed them with telescopic stick. Looking at the white chunks that were smashed on the ground, Diaz waved his hand and continued forward. But after a few steps, the alarm sounded again. One wave had just subsided, and another wave had risen. It was the horny creatures from before. But this time, there were more of them, no less than 100. Carrie looked at the miniature submachine gun he was carrying and sighed. The bullets of the submachine gun were really useless against these creatures. It was better to change to armor-piercing bullets. Retreat, Diaz said immediately. This kind of environment was too disadvantageous for them. At the same time, Diaz also sent out a distress signal, asking for help. He also sent some information about these horny creatures. Outside the planet, on the starship, Schotten looked at the situation of the 6 teams on the screen. Of the 6 teams, 3 had sent out distress signals. Schotten estimated that the remaining 3 teams wouldn't have it easy either. It was only a matter of time before they called for help. Second team, get ready. After giving a few instructions to the people beside him, Schotten took his equipment and went to support the second team. Chapter 95. In the forest, Diaz opened the subspace container in his hand and took out the ammo inside for everyone to replenish. Logically speaking, subspace containers on planets with a habitability rating of A and below would be unstable. Therefore, most people would only use subspace containers on habitable planets. For planets with a habitability rating of B and below, opening a subspace container would involve different degrees of risk. Even so, Diaz still opened it. If they did not replenish their ammo, it would be difficult for them to have time to replenish their ammo once they started fighting. Fortunately, the activation went smoothly. Although there were some effects and it was not very stable, they were able to take out the items. Vice Captain, it's not just one side that has those things, Xiao Shang exclaimed. The scanner showed a few more dots. After a second scan and cross-analysis of the parameters, they confirmed that these were indeed the creatures with keratin on their heads. They had formed a fan shape and surrounded Diaz and the others. They were either surrounding them or forcing them to the back. They're forcing us back, Xiao Shang said. Yes, if they were only surrounding them, why were they only forming a fan shape? If they were forcing them back, then what would be waiting for them? Although they did not know, it would definitely be more dangerous and disadvantageous to them. They could not retreat. They were in a dangerous situation now. If they retreated, they might be in a situation where they would most likely die. It seemed that these guys were quite intelligent, far higher than they had imagined. After replenishing their ammo, if their aim was good, they could finish them all off with micro-armor-piercing bullet. But this time, these guys seemed to be chasing after their lives. They were even faster than the previous ones. Bang! The bullets struck the hard surface of the horny creatures' heads and drilled through them, entering their heads. Killing one with one shot was indeed a lot easier. However, there were too many of them, and the distance between the two sides was still shrinking. Even though there were only 12 of them, they still had a certain level of confidence in facing those guys with no less than 300. At least the situation was not too bad. Just as they had this thought, the alarm sounded. This time, what the scanning system showed made their hearts sink. Behind these horny creatures, another group of unknown creatures came. They were very fast and did not move in a straight line. The most special thing was that although the unknown creatures behind them were not running in a straight line and were dodging, they were still running toward them in a fan shape. Not long after, everyone saw the creatures running from behind through the telescopic system. They were larger than the horny creatures. Excluding the spikes on their backs, these horny creatures were about a meter tall, while the creatures behind them were more than twice the size of the horny creatures. If these horny creatures were partially armed, then the ones that came later were fully armed. Damn it, these guys are wearing armor again. Moreover, the armor was a lot more difficult to deal with than those guys who only had their heads and torsos equipped. Its body was covered with a hard, red and black substance that looked like a crystal. From its appearance, it looked a little like a leopard. Carrie took out another type of bullet. This type of bullet looked similar to the armor-piercing bullet, but the color of the bullet was different. Each bullet had a special symbol on it. Bang! The bullet hit one of the big guys, penetrated the thick, hard surface, and went inside before exploding. Blood spurted out of the creature's mouth. A lot of the hard, red and black substance on its body was lifted up due to the internal shock, but its body did not seem to have been blown into pieces. Of course, even though it looked fine, its internal organs were blown up. It moved around for a while before it stopped moving. When the others of its kind saw this, they sped up again and ran with more skill, agility, and leaping ability. It was very difficult to lock onto them and shoot them. The two shots that Carrie fired later did not hit their targets but hit the tree trunks instead. The resulting explosion did not affect those creatures much. As long as they missed, even if the explosion happened right next to them, it would not hurt them much. The hard protection on their bodies allowed them to avoid the damage of such an explosion. Due to the red and black monsters coming from behind, the horny creatures running at the front became even more desperate. The horny creatures at the front were the ones who died, and they were also the ones who attracted most of the firepower. There were more than 20 monsters at the back, and this was only what they could see. Diaz did not know if there were more hiding outside their scanning range. Perhaps there were some lying in ambush at the back. Up until now, Carrie was the only one who had killed one first. They were having a hard time fighting two of the creatures at the same time. The two sides were getting closer and closer. Retreat first. Stall for time. The captain and the others will come to support us. Diaz roared. He had no other choice now. If they did not fight while retreating to find suitable cover, it would be very difficult to deal with them once they got close. The monsters behind them could probably kill them with a single swipe of their claws. Climb up a tree? Impossible. They would be dead meat if they did that. No matter how thick a tree was, it would not be able to withstand the claws of these things. Moreover, based on the movements of those creatures, they could also climb up trees. Perhaps they were much more agile in trees than they were. Hoverboards? Although they brought them, they did not dare to use them. If they wanted to fly, they could only fly above the forest. Judging from the jumping speed of those things, they could reach a certain height as long as they borrowed the strength of the tree trunk. Meanwhile, many birds had gathered in the sky above the forest at some point. They could only see their shadows flashing by through the gaps between the leaves. However, everyone knew that as soon as they went up, they would become the target of a multitude of attacks. In the air, humans were not as agile as those big birds, so they would only die even faster. Although they knew that there would be more difficult situations ahead, they had no other choice. Now that they had been forced to this point, they could only take one step at a time and wait for reinforcements from the back. Boom! Someone used a shoulder cannon. Although shoulder cannons were more destructive and definitely more lethal than bullets, they were not very effective against those big guys. The reason was because of the terrain and environment here. This was a forest, and there were thick tree trunks everywhere. Those big guys had very sensitive senses and dodged very quickly, so it was very difficult to really lock onto them. The energy bullets that hit the tree trunks would at most cause some damage to the horny creatures in front of them, but they would not cause much actual damage to the big guys. At most, they would peel off some of their hard skin. However, if they used the shoulder cannon, they would be able to wipe out some of the horny creatures in front of them first, which would reduce their burden by quite a bit. They had already eliminated 3/4 of the horny creatures in front of them, and they had yet to deal with the monsters at the back. The 12 of them alone would not be able to handle them. One of the big guys running at the back ran into one of the plants with red and white flowers when it was dodging bullets, and it directly used its 2 claws to tear the plant in half. This made everyone realize just how difficult it would be to fight these guys in close combat. Even a rank A genotype would not dare to fight them head-on without a weapon, not to mention that the other party had the advantage in numbers. Ba Dao's extra 2 pairs of hands came into play. Although his accuracy might not be as good as Silen's, it was still an extra helping hand. Silen's rapid fire had killed most of the horny skinned beasts on his side, so the others should be able to deal with the remaining horny skinned beasts. After reloading, Silen aimed his gun at the big guys behind the horny creatures. They were very alert, especially when they saw Carrie kill one of them with a single shot. They became even more vigilant, and they were very sensitive to being locked onto. Before Carrie could fire, they had already dodged to the side. Bang! A hole was blasted open on the head of one of the big guys, and the dark red hard substance on its skin splattered everywhere. Due to inertia, it rolled on the ground twice before it stopped moving. It did not even sense that it had been locked onto, and it was suddenly shot while it was running. Bang! 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 Another 3 shots were fired in quick succession, and 3 more big guys were shot and fell to the ground. After Silen killed 7 of them, the remaining horny creatures and the big guys covered in hard substance caught up to them. Clang! Sparks flew when the wrist blades that popped out cut into the skin of these big guys, which showed just how hard their skin was. Although they managed to cut in a little, the wounds were too shallow. Unless they were all cut in the same spot, they would not be able to do much damage even if they were torn apart. Extremely low temperature condensation and flames were not very effective against them, and their surface defense was too good. Fortunately, Silen had taken care of 7 of them, and together with the one that Carrie had taken care of first, there were still 15 left. The horny skinned beasts did not stop there. Instead, they continued to run, so the group only had to face these 15 big guys. Although they were wearing protective suits, the group's dodging speed was still very fast, and they were looking for points of attack as they dodged. Perhaps they knew that Silen posed the greatest threat to them, so 3 of them attacked Silen. Using the recoil from the wrist blades hitting their bodies, Silen jumped up and fired a shot into the mouth of one of the big guys that was pouncing at him. The impact from the bullet's explosion lifted countless small pieces off its hard surface, and dark red blood and internal organ fragments also sprayed out of its mouth. After that shot, Silen did not stop. He dodged the one that was coming at him from behind, stepped on the tree trunk with his foot, twisted his body, and quickly jumped up to dodge. Then, he fired another shot at the one that was pouncing at him from the side. This series of attacks was extremely fast. Even Diaz would have a hard time doing this while wearing protective suit. The big guy that was pouncing at him had already leaped off the ground, so it could not dodge instantly and was shot directly. He put away his wrist blades, and at the same time, 3 small hooks popped out and hooked onto the thick tree trunk next to him. He turned around along the trunk and fired another shot at the one that was about to make a move. Diaz, who was fighting a big guy, roared in his heart, "I haven't even taken care of one, and that kid has already taken care of 3. After taking care of 3, Silen found an opening and helped Xiao Shang take care of one. That big guy's mistake was that it should not have sent Xiao Shang flying at that moment, giving Silen the opportunity to take care of it. If the 2 of them were too close, it would not have been easy to shoot. "Silen, go help Carrie. There are 2 attacking him," Xiao Shang roared. They thought that Carrie was the first to kill one, so the big guys classified Carrie and Silen as dangerous. The most threatening one was Silen, so they sent out 3 of them, followed by Carrie, so 2 of them went to deal with Carrie, and the remaining one was a one-on-one. Carrie? That guy was pushed too hard by 2 of them, so he should have retreated a little further than everyone else, but he should not have retreated beyond the range of the scanner, right? In terms of flexibility, Carrie was not as good as Silen, so the only thing he could do was to prevent the 2 from attacking him from the front and back. However, this guy could not have retreated so far that he could not even see his shadow, right? Chapter 96. The further he went, the denser the grass became. From the knee-high grass, Silen followed the traces left behind by the creature. It didn't take long for him to see a dead alien beast covered in black and red scales. Judging from the signs, this big guy was indeed killed by a bullet that exploded from the inside after it was shot. Black bugs crawled out of the ground and were eating. The strange thing was, not far from where the big guy died, the traces on the grass changed. They looked like they were dragged. There were many broken vines in the surroundings. Although these vines weren't thick, they were very tough. The broken parts of the vines weren't smooth, and it looked like they were forcefully broken. After tracking for a while, Silen saw another big fellow. It had also been shot and died from an internal explosion. From this point onwards, there were clear signs of struggle in the dragging traces. Pushing aside the grass, Silen discovered 3 deep scratches on the ground. They were probably left behind by Carrie's claws when he was being dragged by the vines. Just a few steps later, Silen found a severed vine in the bushes. The cut was very smooth, so it should be Carrie who cut it with a knife. Further ahead was a steep slope. Below the slope was a green river. The river wasn't wide, but the current was very fast. Silen found Carrie's gun on the slope. Carrie must have rolled down the slope and fell into the river. The protective suit was waterproof, but after all this, Carrie's protective suit must have been seriously damaged. The positioning device on his body didn't respond either. Silen turned on the communicator to leave a message for Diaz, but he found that the communicator was buzzing and the signal was in chaos. What's going on? Forget it, let's not worry about it for now. Silen had installed a message button at the slope. If Diaz and the others had finished their business on the other side and followed the trail here, they would definitely discover this button. Silen exhaled and looked down the river, hoping that Carrie was still safe. How is Carrie now? Carrie's current situation was very bad, very bad. When he was chased by the 2 big guys, his feet were tied up by the vines under the grass. But thanks to these vines, the speed at which his feet were tied up was very fast. Carrie didn't need to pay attention to his feet. He could focus on the 2 big guys behind him. The 2 big guys were obviously also troubled by the vines, which gave Carrie an opportunity to take advantage of. Otherwise, with the speed of those 2 beasts, they wouldn't have been destroyed so easily. However, success was due to vines and also due to vines. Carrie's protective suit was torn by a big guy, but he wasn't scratched. When the vines wrapped around Carrie, the capillaries on the vines pierced through Carrie's skin, which was not protected by the protective suit. The neurotoxin penetrated deep into Carrie's body, so when Carrie cut the vines, his consciousness was already blurred and he was in a trance. After staggering a few steps, he rolled down the steep slope and fell into the river. Before falling, Carrie pressed the life button with difficulty, and a life buoy surrounded him. He didn't know how far he was washed away, but Carrie's A-rank genes played an advantage, and the trance caused by the neurotoxin in his body began to lessen. If a person below C-rank suffered from this toxin, they probably wouldn't last long before dying. After recovering some consciousness and physical strength, Carrie pressed a device on his arm, and a drill with a rope flew out. The drill shot into the stone wall next to the river and drilled into it. Then the rope retracted and pulled Carrie to the shore. After climbing ashore and retrieving the drill in the stone wall, Carrie looked above the stone wall. Above it was the forest, similar to the steep slope that he fell down. However, Carrie planned to stay here for the time being. What if he went up and encountered those big guys again? He didn't know if the communicator was broken or there was no signal, but there was no response. Taking a breath, Carrie looked at the dark green river. The river was a bit strange. The speed of the river had decreased a lot, and it was almost flat. Carrie saw a bunch of egg-sized emerald green objects floating towards him from the river. Although his vision wasn't as sharp as usual due to the neurotoxin's influence, Carrie was sure that there were no such things just now. The emerald green objects on the river surface increased, and they gathered toward Carrie. F***CK. No matter how confused Carrie was, he knew that these things were not good. He flicked the drill hook again and threw it toward the steep slope above the stone wall. After pulling it up the slope, the claw hook popped out from his wrist, and he climbed up the slope bit by bit. What if he accidentally fell down again? After climbing up the slope, Carrie lay on the ground beside a large rock. He felt like a puddle of paste, and he had no strength left. Although the symptoms of the neurotoxin had lessened, and his consciousness was much clearer, he still felt weak all over. He didn't know where the firearms on him were. If he encountered those hard black and red alien beasts again, only death would await him. In his current state, it was difficult to even cut a fruit with his wrist knife. As Carrie was thinking, he heard a familiar low growl. It was the kind of growl that was slow and rhythmic like breathing. Auditory hallucination? He listened attentively and raised his head. What a tragedy! Carrie wailed in his heart. He had just thought of these guys, and they had appeared. 1, 2, 3, 6. What happened to Diaz and the rest? Why were there 6 of them here? If it was possible, Carrie wanted to grab the cannon and fight it out with these guys. He would die without regrets. However, the current situation made him feel very unwilling. The 6 black and red alien beasts were not in a hurry to pounce on Carrie. Instead, they slowly walked towards him. Their gazes made Carrie feel like he was a stupid monkey for others to watch. Gazes? Carrie looked carefully. Indeed, the gazes in their eyes were not like those of ordinary animals, but more like the eyes of humans. That was called, yes, spirituality. That was what Yudi said. Seeing the 6 big guys slowly approaching, Carrie slowly propped up his upper body, leaned his back against the rock, and flicked out his wrist knife. In fact, his entire arm, which was connected to the wrist knife, was trembling. The neurotoxin had not been completely cleared, and his muscles were still twitching. However, there was still a grenade in the bag at his waist. In such a situation where death was certain, some people would choose to commit suicide, but not Carrie. He would fight to the end, even if he had to die together with his enemies. This was his belief, the belief he had chosen when he walked the path of a hunter. Seeing Carrie flick out his wrist knife, the 6 big guys revealed looks of disdain. Come on, you ugly guys. When they were within 10 meters of him, Carrie's other hand without the wrist knife turned to the grenade, ready to press the button. Roar, a long roar like the roar of an ancient giant beast, the sound wave almost burst Carrie's eardrums. However, hearing this sound, Carrie almost cried. A gray figure flashed. Bang! Out of the 6 exotic beasts, 1 was sent flying, 1 was stepped on, and the other 4 were forced 20 meters away by the sound waves coming straight at them. The streamlined body glowed with a metallic luster, with a different kind of elegance, looking down at the 4 black and red alien beasts 20 meters away. Chapter 97. Carrie stared blankly at the gray fellow in front of him that was even bigger than the red and black exotic beast. From its appearance, it looked a little like a cheetah and a little like a lion. Its skin had a metallic luster, but it felt very soft, like liquid metal. Moreover, it didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beast. However, why did that sound so much like that gluttonous wee meow? In the roar just now, the high-frequency sound waves were only directed at the red and black exotic beasts and not in Carrie's direction. Otherwise, based on Carrie's current state, he would probably die on the ground with blood flowing out of his orifices. This big fellow with a metallic luster knocked a red and black exotic beast into the air and even stepped on another one under its claws. The hard surface of the exotic beast that was stepped on was cracked, and many red and black fine pieces were peeled off to the side. It clearly didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts, and its body was only slightly bigger. However, its domineering aura was displayed to the fullest. Under its elegant appearance, it couldn't hide its arrogance and recklessness. It exerted force under its claws. Crack, crack, crack. A cracking sound came from the red and black exotic beast under its claws. Black-red blood flowed continuously from its mouth, and its sharp white teeth were dyed red with blood. Roar, a miserable howl resounded through the forest. Even Carrie felt a chill run down his spine when he heard the voice. The birds circling in the air hurriedly cried a few times and flew away in a hurry. The 4 red and black exotic beasts bared their teeth and let out a low roar. The big metal fellow looked at the red and black exotic beast that could no longer move under its claws. With a chee sound, it extended its scythe-like claws. Carrie felt that the big metal fellow laughed disdainfully when it looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in front of it. Then, its claws swept across the red and black exotic beast that had lost its ability to move on the ground. Carrie was dumbfounded as he watched the red and black exotic beast that even his wrist blade couldn't finish off in one go be cut into pieces. It really was like cutting a fruit, and there wasn't a single trace of blood on its claws. After it was done, it even looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in a threatening manner. It didn't roar or bare its teeth. With just a simple glance, the 4 red and black exotic beasts turned around and ran away. Yo, what a mess! After absorbing the white ball, Huemao's metal form had become even more perfect. Without that kind of mechanical roughness, it looked smoother. Listening to the familiar voice, Carrie was still a little unsure. Who? Snore? It's Hubie Lu. Huemao's body slowly shrunk, returning to its original cat form. However, even this small cat form could not conceal its arrogance. It was clearly much lower than Carrie's, but Carrie felt that this fellow was still looking down on him. Carrie smiled and accidentally choked. He coughed twice and then looked at Huimao, who was licking his claws and wiping his face. Wheeze, come and give me a hug. Hold my ass. I could have eaten all 4 of them, but because of you, I had no choice but to spare them, Huimao said unhappily. Sillin told it, focus on Carrie's comfort. Don't just think about eating. Then I'm really sorry. I dragged you down. Even so, Carrie didn't feel very apologetic. He was very grateful to Huimao for saving him at a critical moment. At the same time, Carrie also understood what Sillin meant when he said, when in danger, that cat will show mercy and save your life. Why don't I treat you to a feast next time when I have time? At least you know what's good for you. Huemao's tone showed that he was giving him face. By the way, how did you find me? Carrie asked. Sillin sent a sonic signal flare. I only found out that something happened to you when I came over. I was wondering how something could happen to Sillin so easily with his ability. Where's Sillin? I'll be there soon. After Sillin handed the task of finding Carrie to Huimao, he returned to check on Dias's situation. If he was looking for Carrie, Huimao would have an advantage. Moreover, Sillin believed in Huimao's ability. Before he left, he added, other than eating and sleeping, prove your worth. If you can't even save a person, you can stay here and live with the Ultra Beast. Huimao was so angry that he almost chopped down all the trees in the area. Not long after, Sillin came looking for him. He and Huimao had a special connection. This was also why Huimao said that they were the same kind. After checking Carrie's physical condition, Sillin was relieved when he found that there weren't any particularly serious injuries. The vice captain and the others should be with the captain now. The reinforcements are here, and they came directly with the aircraft. I left a message for them and left a signal transmitter along the way. This place is very strange. There's a strong interference effect, but as long as they fly over here, they should be able to receive the signal within a small range. Knowing that everyone was fine, Carrie was also a lot more relaxed. Wheeze is very strong. Huimao squinted his eyes, enjoying Carrie's scratching of his chin service. When he heard this, he snorted. Sillin glanced at the two and shook his head. He then walked to the red and black Ultra Beast that Huimao had chopped into pieces. I really don't know how many of these things there are. There were 6 of them just now. If it wasn't for Wheeze, I would have been dead, Carrie said. No, it's not. These 6 are not the group we originally encountered, Sillin said with a frown. Group? Yes. They are social animals. The forest that we passed through before was a group. There are many smells in the air, including the smell of their territory. However, the smell on this one doesn't belong to that forest. Carrie's face twitched. He thought that his sense of smell was very sensitive, but he really did not smell anything special. Of course, apart from the smell of blood. They're very intelligent. At the beginning, they were probably driving the horny-skinned beasts to test us. It's not that those horny-skinned beasts are intelligent. The real masterminds are these guys and those birds in the sky. Scylla pointed above his head as he said this. The snakes we encountered were thrown down by those birds circling in the sky. With the cover of the dense branches, those snakes wouldn't fall to their deaths even if they fell from the sky. These snakes should be very familiar with the smell of those horny-skinned beasts. They will chase after the smell factor in the air. And these snakes are also testing us. Carrie's mouth was wide open. Weren't these red and black ultra beasts a little too cunning? Then, for the third time, they drove out even more horny-skinned beasts to exhaust our weapons and ammunition. At the same time, they closed in on us in a fan shape, forcing us back while preparing to attack from behind the horny-skinned beast. It's like they're hunting. While they're hunting, they'll force us towards the steep slope. There will be vines entangling us along the way. They'll watch their prey struggle and force them into a corner step by step. Their goal isn't to eat, but to enjoy this pleasure and learn from it. Carrie felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. After being a hunter for so long, this was the first time he was counterattacked by an ultra beast and ended up as prey. Captain and the others are coming. Scylla looked at the sky and turned around to help Carrie up. They used a hoverboard, and the two of them and one cat flew towards the slowly descending spaceplane that opened its hatch. Seeing that both Carrie and Scylla were fine, Dias's worried heart finally relaxed. Let's return to the starship first. The situation this time is a little complicated.